I hereby call our meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Cody, do you have a motion to make?
Yeah. I wanted to make a motion to see if we could move the strategic plan, science goal action item just to be after the Old Greenwich, building discussion.
I will second that motion. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay, Cody, your motion has passed.
Thanks, Joe.
You're very welcome. Then that brings us, we're hitting action right away. It's action time. So we're going to go straight into Old Greenwich action. So Michael, can you take over?
A motion, I'll make the motion here to get on the table and then a comment afterwards. So there are two motions. The first one is to reaffirm our approval of and hereby request an interim appropriation for fiscal year 2024 of $39,795,873 for construction funding for the Old Greenwich School renovation project. Now that the project has received municipal improvement status. And then the second motion is to ask the. Sorry.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. And Mike, can you hear me in the back? Okay, Mike can hear me. So great.
So you have one motion.
I don't know if you can make two motions.
And I'll just make.
Well, let's do-
I thought we already.
I recommend we do one at a time. Would
Fine.
anyone like to second? Laura, you'd like to second? Okay, so then any discussion?
Yes. So earlier this week, after a lengthy, God bless them, after a lengthy P and Z meeting, the Old Greenwich renovation project received municipal improvement status. Hooray! The board, of course, remembers the conversations that we had last week, over the last month with the legal department about the appropriate order of things, whether or not you agree with the decision of the legal department that the municipal improvement status is necessary for this request. We thought it'd be appropriate at this time to bring it back. James Waters from the chair of the Old Greenwich Building Committee is here, and I think he had a brief update to bring us up to speed.
You have to hold it down.
Otherwise, Mike can't hear you in the back.
Hold it.
Let's
You can switch the file.
Okay, I don't have much of a prepared statement. I did submit for all of you an update that the building committee put together over the last 48 hours. Actually, a little bit less than that. I can just tell you a couple things. One is this building committee, once the BET rejected construction funds in June, this building committee doubled its efforts to get towards municipal improvement. We heard process-related arguments, and we answered by following the process to a T. So I think, I would encourage this entire board. The building committee deserves a tremendous amount of credit for working through the summer. And I know some are online, and Ms. Dawson's in the room with us. And everybody had in their mind, let's get to municipal improvement while we're doing design development. Design development is an expensive phase of this process, and huge credit to the whole committee. The second thing I would just highlight that's in this update that we submitted and is on your board docs is on the second page. The first page is just at the top half is just a quick update. Here are the things we've done. The bottom half of the first page is just here are the numbers you've already seen before. I would flag about 2/3 of the way down. There's some italicized something wording. Our construction manager thinks our reimbursement is going to go up slightly. We're working with, we've been talking to members of the state delegation who seem to believe we may be able to get even more, but this is a sort of on a calculated basis. This is, what we know about. It's $300,000, but that's, I think, a good thing. The second page is just the timeline. How does this make sense? Why would we go back now? The reason we would go back now is there's an outside chance, if the stars align, as I said at P&Z the other night, that we could break ground next summer. I discussed this with our construction manager today, with our owner's rep today, with our architect today. And I said, guys, I want somebody to tell me if you think I'm crazy. And they said, it's tight, but it can be done, right? And so this is how it can be done. So if this board approves this interim appropriation tonight, we will turn around and go to the BET as soon as tonight or tomorrow. There are dates on their calendar that we will ask to be added to the agenda. I've discussed this with the RTM moderator about how we could then go to the RTM about it. That's explained. The state approvals, that's the biggest thing that, because we didn't, the BET rejected this funding in June. That's the biggest, thing we're up against is we'd have to get special legislation. Is no guarantee, right? But we do have a state delegation that has said they want to fight for this.
Just, can I stop you on that
Yeah.
point right there?
Yeah.
If it doesn't get on the special legislation for December, what does that mean?
It would mean we are back to where we thought, which is June 30th. Yeah.
Does that slow down,
It would.
putting everything aside, if everything else happens, but for the state piece, that prevents us from putting a shovel into the ground?
I think there's different schools of thought on this, but I think that, one of the school of thought is you could proceed anyway, but you would be putting at risk that $6.5 million. Because the state could come back and be like, nah, that's actually not reimbursable, or, so the number may not be sort of, it's basically guaranteed not guaranteed, but it's locked in if you do it following the process. Otherwise, it's sort of maybe we'll get you back after you've already started spending the money.
But they don't pay out anyway until after the building is completed, correct?
And I think tell me if you guys may have a different understanding, but I think my understanding is that there are different milestones. You don't get the full thing for sure. I'm not sure. It's spread out over time, I believe.
And ultimately, the state holds back a small amount until the audit of the project is done.
Right.
But there are progress payments along
Right.
the way. But not, you have to put in as the work is completed. But you can't even start your bidding process until you're on the list or approved.
Yeah, or you're putting it at risk.
So just, sorry if I'm being dense here, but what are we putting at risk?
This
So they could reject all of it.
they could say this is not a state approved project, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's my understanding.
No, that's, okay.
Over the length of.
So aren't we then putting at risk money in advance of what we've been doing on CMS then, if we keep moving forward? Because that's where I'm seeing the disconnect here.
We've been told something different.
Let's talk
so
about CMS. when-
I will,
But I'm not bringing up CMS, but that's why I'm asking this question, because we're getting two different sets of information regarding the putting the shovel into the ground. And I just would rather know, is it A or is it B?
so if there was a letter from DAS that was sent to Representative Meskers that sort of laid out the process, the ideal process, but a somewhat also acceptable process. And so as I understand it, you still have to have your plans. They have to approve your plans as educationally sound to some degree,
Who is the state?
the state. So there's the money, and then there's the evaluation of your architectural plans. They sometimes get commingled, but they're two separate things.
Okay, so is our professional staff that we've hired for this project, architects, design, et cetera, they're saying that if we don't get on the list in December, then we're going to wait until we get on the list in June?
I think from the building committee's perspective, what I want to what we are very focused on is, yes, we will help pursue the state reimbursement. My understanding is if we do not get on the list in December through special legislation and have our reimbursement locked in, I think that should, let's play out a scenario that I think you're trying to get at, which is you approve the money. Let's say everybody approves the money. We're unable to get special legislation, right? So I think at that point, this board would want us to come back rather than just go and spend the money before we have state reimbursement, right? I mean, I think that, so, I would expect we would want to come back and talk to you about that once we see what happens with the special legislation piece. And at that point, we would, want your approval on the game plan. Okay, let's go back to the state by June 30. By then we could go January 1st. So we're in advance of June 30. But I think, that would be my.
No, I understand. Look, I'm going to approve the interim. That's not my issue. My issue is if we don't get on the December list, and then and what I'm struggling with is then if we don't get on the December list and we're not willing to move forward, then I've tied up $41 million of capital that I could otherwise spend, because otherwise you're not getting onto the June list. So I could give it to you later in time, right? And therefore I could spend $41 million on this town could spend $41 million on something else.
Sure.
That's my issue, is the worry of the tying up. If it doesn't come back, that's where I'm at.
Could I read from the list, the letter from DAS, the Department of Administrative Services, which does the reimbursement?
Go ahead.
It said, any application received after June 2023 will be considered submitted for June 30, 2024, and will be part of the 2025 school priority list. Thus, if Greenwich cannot make the June 30, 2023 list, they will have to wait for June 30th, 2024, or seek special legislation through their delegation to be added to the priority list. I'm skimming ahead. Greenwich can proceed with their project following statutory processes to obtain the funding locally through the town's process, submit their grant application in June 2024, and be eligible for reimbursement upon grant commitment in 2025, understanding that there are risks of not being reimbursed should the legislature not pass the school priority list bill, or should the governor not give his signature. So those are the two risks. It doesn't say you won't get reimbursed. Those are the two ifs that could jeopardize the reimbursement. So that was the list, the letter we received.
James, is there anything else in your report you wanted to highlight with that?
No, and the last little bit is just where we are in the process. We are exactly where I said we would be in June. We're exactly where we thought we would be when we first talked to you in February. So we are right on schedule. So take that for what you will.
Well, I'll call the question if that's okay. Oh, sorry. One more thing to add. Go ahead.
No, not James. I just wanted to thank you that this is a Herculean effort by the committee. I'm just wanted to express my frustration that we're voting on the exact same thing we voted on in June. And I'm not 100% convinced that the town attorney's guidance is more than just one lawyer's opinion. But it is, we are where we are, but I think we've asked for this money. I'm in favor of asking for the money again. I think anything we as a board can do to fast track the project, I think probably all of us are in favor of. So I just wanted to express support and kind of my frustration at the amount of time and resources that have been spent kind of spinning our wheels, when if everything had been passed 4 months ago, we'd be sitting in a different position, not talking about reimbursements, and we'd be moving along to the shovel hitting the ground July 1 of 24.
Kathleen?
Well, I completely agree with everything Christina said, especially the frustration around sort of replaying the same scene. However, I just want to say to you, James, it says a lot about your leadership, because you kind of keep pushing and you're always very good at sort of reminding everybody what's happened, where we're going, and laying it out in a manner. And I think we're here because of the way you're driving this project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will call the question. And what everyone is about to witness is what I mentioned the other day at our meeting. The Board of Ed is about to perform the impossible. We're going to have 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans hopefully agree on an issue. So I'm just joking. All in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans have all agreed. Thank you. Okay. And Michael, you had a second motion.
Right. So, and both of these motions are very, very, very similar to both that we passed last spring. And Ms. Downey helped with the wording, so she gets credit. I promise I'd give her some credit. So add this. Number 2 is ask the BET to remove conditions on the $1,806,000 for A&E funding for fiscal year 2024 budget, now that the project has reached municipal improvement status.
Somebody needs a second. Christina, second. Any conversation?
James, if you give us a moment, it's helpful for James to explain that because of the timeline and things, and the danger of the project stalling because of lack of released funds.
So when the BET passed the FY 23-24 budget, they included $1,086,000 on A&E funding, which this board requested and the first selectman approved. What the BET did, though, is they added 3 conditions for us to be able to access that money. The first condition is for the BET to hire an independent cost estimator for our project. My understanding is they have made 0 progress on that. And maybe I'm happy for someone to tell me otherwise. The second condition is for the BET to approve any estimate above the original 24.5 million. And the third condition was for the building committee or the project to get municipal improvement status. This building committee has accomplished the only thing we can accomplish of those 3, which is number 3. And obviously that's what we just achieved with is municipal improvement status earlier this week. To date, the building committee has spent $409,000 out of 1 million. I will tell you that we are doing a good job managing our resources so far to get all the way to MI at $400,000 with design development halfway done. I think is a credit to our owner's rep, frankly. But that $1 million, so that leaves us $591,000 left. That money, based on our latest cash flow, will be exhausted entirely at the beginning of January, by sometime in the month of January. So if the BET does not release the conditions on the $1,086,000 in January, I will be coming back to this board and saying, all work, we're out of money. All work will stop. When we have to tell our professional team that we can't pay them anymore. And let me know when we can get some money going to keep this going. So that's where we're at. And the reason I was very clear with you and with the first selectman and with the BET on why we needed those funds. And it's exactly what I'm describing to you right now.
Well, I personally don't want the work to stop, so I'm gonna I'll have all my colleagues vote and see, hopefully they'll vote in favor of this. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Once again, we have a unanimous vote in support. Motion passes. James,
Thank you.
thank you very much. All the hard work you're putting in, fantastic. Thank you very much. You are, the town should be very proud of you and your committee, so thank you. Michael, what about that other motion we discussed? Is there, Christine, anything we could form to start the discussion? We think it's not really a.
I'll move that it's the sense of the meeting that the board would like to move forward with a renovation of Old Greenwich School and does not want to pursue building a new school.
Seconder. You second that. Now we have discussion.
It might make sense for purposes of framing discussion to define sense of the meeting.
Well, a sense of the meeting is really the board's point of view. It's not binding on any other bodies because I'm not sure what we can and cannot do because this just kind of came up a little while ago. So it was just something Joe and I had discussed as a possibility. And so I wanted to bring it to the table for discussion. And it was just more if we as a board, and I think we probably all feel that we've talked about what the community wants in Old Greenwich. It's also fiscally less expensive to renovate the school versus building a new school. I think we've seen that in the case of Central Middle School, that, if it gives a sense of where we as a board are, which is why it's a sense of the meeting.
Laura.
I will happily second your sense of the meeting. Oh, then you don't need my second, but I will say it's a little, I'll third it, but it's a little strange for another board to have imposed sort of that condition on a building committee that doesn't have ed specs for a new build and has, no money to study that particular process. So I don't know how that condition could even be placed on you, but yes, let's move this along.
Well, if it came to the board now and we had a decision to make whether we had to choose one or the other, I would clearly choose the renovation. So the work that might possibly be done on a new build, in my mind, is wasted work, wasted time. Because therefore, another group might come, another committee, another board might come and say, well, this is what we would like you, the Board of Ed, to do. But we're kind of saying to them, we don't want to do this. We want to do the renovation of Old Greenwich School as our building committee is working towards. That's the thinking behind it as far as the discussions I've had earlier prior to the beginning of this meeting. Anyone else want to add something, Michael?
I think it's important to give some context here because the Old Greenwich project has been it's a lengthy history dating back to the pre-COVID feasibility work, and even before that with the master plan, right? They and none of those documents spoke about a rebuild. For folks just tuning in, right? So in the community conversation that has happened over the last year as this project has started to come towards fruition and towards approval of funding, obviously the BET has raised questions about whether or not a new building is more fiscally appropriate. Certainly also given the cost estimates, right? So we're now at 38 million, obviously, or 39 million. It was at one point it was less, but we do know why all that happened, and it's certainly a reasonable thing. So they made that argument. The last spring, the board will remember my quixotic failure in making a motion to request funds for a new build. That was not because I necessarily, but I think it was about $100,000 is what we requested. That was not because I was in favor of a new build. That was because I felt strongly that if we were going to have that community conversation and prove our point to other boards, having those hard facts made sense. So that's not where we are right now, and I get that, and there's nothing binding about that. And to be clear, I do not think it makes sense. I think since that spring, we've heard significant conversations and significant comments from the community. James could tell us the number of community forums and community meetings that the building committee has had. They are numerous, and the consensus is almost universal around renovation. Nobody wants to tear down the at least historic looking, if not officially historic, old Greenwich building. And now that we see some of the renderings of the project, which will come back to the board for final approval, but the drawings are gorgeous and speak to the renovation of the project. So I do think this makes sense. I do think that the community conversations are important. If we're taking a sense of the meeting, I've been very clear from the beginning where I think this project should go. Yeah, I guess that's where we are.
You would like to speak?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Oh, you're good. So let's vote. All in favor of the sense of the meeting, please raise your hand. That's unanimous again. Okay, that sense of the meeting passes. Next action item is the strategic plan science goal. Had anyone wanted to make this motion, or shall I? Michael?
Can I make the motion? Oh, Christina, would you like to make the motion since?
Sure thing. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the addition of GPS strategic plan goal number 3, mastery of science, as presented.
Michael seconds it. Now discussion. Dr. Jones?
So when we approved the strategic plan back in February, this goal was not on here. And so we just want to make it officially, since it's on here. And basically it's for 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. And you can see the metrics on the right-hand side. So it's really pretty simple. Yes.
Michael?
So in the spirit of community conversation, so after many conversations around among the board table and whatnot about the strategic plan, once we approved it, we did get community feedback. What about science and things like that? So the administration's work here in following the goals, the format of the plan is to, obviously science is just as important and an important part of what we're doing anyway. So this really speaks to the work that the district is doing as much as in addition to the strategic plan.
Karen?
Quick question. Is it supposed to mirror? Because it doesn't in the language in the goals. So for math and reading, we have a caveat in there for those that have been there for been within GPS for 5 years. That does not appear to be in goal 3 for mastery of science. So are we not doing that here?
Well, it's a little different than SBA because it's only given in 5th grade, 8th grade, and then high school. So we didn't go in that direction. We just are looking at each of those 3 grades, where SBAC starts young and goes all the way through 8th grade.
Did you want to, since it starts only at those particular grades, did you want to put in a caveat with respect to certain students that only come in at certain points in time, or you're comfortable with if they've been here for 6 months, a year, or for the full 5 years?
We were
6 years.
comfortable with this goal as it's written.
Any further questions? Then let's vote. All in
What?
favor?
Oh,
Oh, sorry, Cody, I didn't see your hand.
I was just gonna ask Mike or anyone else from the committee that worked on this if they had any just personal views.
The committee didn't meet on this.
We didn't technically meet on this. We had conversations over the course of the summer, but we haven't met since the last meeting. So we haven't seen this until it hit the agenda in all
Did you guys discuss the science or having a science thing when it was designed, or was it kind of like an oversight?
It was an oversight that we're fixing, and I'll admit it, because the moment we passed this, I said, we're missing something. And to be honest, Mike and I had been talking about it all summer, saying it needed to be corrected because it was an error on our part. It was an error on the committee's part not to include science. So we're fixing that tonight.
Cool. Thanks for that. That's helpful color. Thank you.
I'm glad you did that because I like science. Science is good. Can we now have a vote? All in favor, please raise your hand. Once again, that motion passes unanimous. Okay, no more action for tonight. Mark, you're up. Curriculum plan review cycle. You're the man. You have big things too?
I'm so excited. I don't have to pay for wallpaper now.
Oh, nice. Oh, thank you. Oh, man.
It's cute that I think that we still don't review.
We saw all the acclimates Blaze got for blowing things up. Of course.
Good evening, everyone. What you have in front of you is what I call the air traffic controller view. So these are all our planes in the air, and it's important for us in a curriculum management plan to be aware of where all of our planes are. The ones that are taking off or landing are at the top of the first page. Those are our priority items. And as you can see, year one is July 2023 to June 2024. And we have a few projects that we're about to embark on. I've emailed Mr. Kelly to solicit some Board of Education members for our K-5 social studies textbook review. We also will be reviewing pre-calculus and calculus in mathematics because we are looking for new textbooks. So everything is color coded the same as last year. I've been presenting this new format for 3 years now, so this is year 4. But what I'm really excited about is that we now have, it's a much more cohesive look K through 12. I know it's a lot to take in. Happy to take questions. We have everybody here tonight, and so if there's a specific question about a content area, we can bring someone up to the table as well. It's important that we keep an eye on everything that we do. The various parts of the curriculum management plan in terms of the cycles, do you have any questions on the coloring or what takes place? Or are you all just in awe of this beautiful document?
A lot.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
Do we have this where we can screen share it for the people that are online?
Is Mike controlling the? It's on Board Docs, and Mike, do you have it to bring up on the screen?
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Kathleen. of course
Mr.
you
Kittle, I didn't know exactly where your whereabouts were, so I didn't know how to FedEx this to you.
No, don't worry. I've got it. I've got the digital copy.
Okay.
Oh, so Mark,
Yeah.
hi. Just a high level question. If I were to go back and look at the prior years, has anything moved like in terms of off the curriculum plan? Did you accelerate anything or push anything back within these subject areas? Or is this exactly would have followed what you had last year if I sort of moved along?
Well, I would say it's refined a little bit in terms of the way we balance needs K through 12. So last year, the plan was a little bit more segmented, but this year we were able to bring all the folks together in the room. look at what our high priorities were. And then what I tasked everyone with was to do a high level audit to determine if things needed to be accelerated. And so what you will see is in 9-12 pre-calculus and calculus may not have come up if we hadn't done that audit. So we are excited about accelerating pre-calculus and calculus this year. As always, we pay attention to what the state tells us. And if the state rolls out new standards, we need to be receptive and nimble to change nationally as well. One of the other reasons we would be responsive to an acceleration is if we're starting to see an achievement trend going in the wrong direction. So there's a number of reasons why we would accelerate. But in terms of the overall snapshot for the 5 years, we're pretty much where we thought we would be last year, with the exception of moving forward with the 9-12 pre-calculus and calculus. K-5 social studies, we expected to move forward this year. The state did just verify that they've approved their new standards. So this work aligns nicely with the review of the standards. The one gray area that we continue to be challenged with is that our waiver still hasn't been reviewed by the state. And I don't hold a high level of confidence that they will maintain even their newly revised timeline, which is that we should receive word before the December holiday. Yeah, and early literacy, where we were required to abide by the laws of the science of reading. We feel quite confident in our approach to early literacy instruction, and we feel very strongly that our waiver should be endorsed and we should continue on our path. But that does hold up our work moving into the grades 3 through 5. So we are in a little limbo there. So there may be some minor adjustments depending on feedback we get from the state in terms of our waiver being accepted.
Hey, Mark, if you could, I'm going to let you run the discussion. I always find that more efficient. So you acknowledge the board member that you would like to ask the question. So therefore it doesn't have to go to me, then to you. Can you handle that?
I'll do my best.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Kowalski.
So if the state comes back and denies the waiver, what does that do to our current program, and how do we have to adjust and pivot, and can we just say no?
I'm hoping that your response would be, let's push back and say no, because we have quite a bit of evidence that supports that not only are we abiding by the tenets of the science of reading, but our past historical performance is that of the highest achieving schools in the state. So we feel quite confident that our approach is the right one, and I would hope that the board would allow us the opportunity to stand our ground on that. I know other districts are planning the same tact, and perhaps Dr. Jones, you'd like to add to that?
So when our superintendents, we meet once a month in this region, and many of us are in the same boat. All but one in our region actually put in a waiver. And we all are of the same thought that we have really strong literacy and the highest performing schools in the state of Connecticut. So if they're going to tell us that we're not okay and that we need to go spend $1 million to go buy a box program, that they have no scientific data to tell us that boxed program is going to get any better results, then we should push back, because it's a lot of money for a district our size.
Well, I've made comments about how I feel about the state, so I would support the pushback.
Thank you, Ms. Kowalski. Ms. Hirsch.
Oh, well, that leads us to a discussion later on strategic plan timing if we don't get that waiver. But, having looked through this, thank you so much when I decided to join the Board of Education. This was one of my biggest goals. So I'm so thrilled 4 years later to see this is so well designed and laid out that we're pushing forward. So thank you so much for all that. But my quick question to you is, do you think there's anything missing? Are there any other priority targets that you think should be added? Because I think it's well covered, but I didn't know if there was something you think is missing.
Well, to the keen eye, you might notice that our arts is missing from this document. And I thought maybe Ms. Newell would come up and share a little bit about our internal conversations about where that should live moving forward on the curriculum management plan. Ms. Newell?
You took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say, I didn't see fine and performing arts on there as a priority target.
It's in the on position. You don't have to touch it. We did that little switch underneath. James said, so you don't have to touch it at all. It'll get you.
Oh, I'm on.
You're on?
There we are.
Perfect.
I'm on. Like I said, I appreciate you always making sure that the arts are highlighted in everything that we do. I would say the reason why you don't see it as a priority area is because I'm not sure that we have significant changes that it would elevate it to the board. For example, we don't have any changes in our national standards. It's still the National Core Arts Standards, where we did a heavy lift as soon as I got here in 2016 to revise all of our curriculum documents to reflect the standards in our National Core Arts Standards. It's centered on the things that I talk about in all my presentations with the 4 artistic processes of connecting, responding, creating, and performing. So there wouldn't be anything necessarily that would entail a high level of funding to revamp all of our curriculum documents. Many of the items that we use are in-house and created in-house, which is really a success of our teachers. We are considered a flagship district for the state because of our high quality materials. I get requests often from other districts to look at our curriculum because it's structured, and our scope and sequence is very well detailed and includes ranges from our novice and our very small beginners, our little guys, all the way up to our very advanced students at the high school level. So I'm not sure that it would necessarily be a priority area. Doesn't mean that there isn't work going on every single summer, which I talked to you guys about in our summer report. So there is work going on, but I don't think there's anything in particular that would rise to this level.
Thank you. I was just going to say, yeah, our arts and music program really are fantastic. So thanks
Thank
for
you.
giving us a look.
Miss Downey?
Yes, thank you. So just to be clear, and also this is for the people who are listening. So the priorities at the top, it does not necessarily encompass everything we teach, right? It's only like I'm just thinking about the high school, right? The countless number of courses. Every high school course is not listed at this top.
That's
It's
correct.
only the ones that believe we need to be addressing.
That are under review and that could potentially require a quote unquote textbook review committee because we're considering a brand new resource.
Great. And the same way that the arts are not also in there.
Right.
Just out of curiosity, because of the number of AP courses are listed in here, and I find it interesting if you could talk a little bit more about, because it's an AP course, right? And it's a very defined curriculum by the AP, not by us.
Yep.
How do you go through this process for an AP course where we're limited in what we can do?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to bring up Mr. Byrne because we're going to go through that with the AP pre-calculus and calculus. You're 100% correct. Part of the challenge with placing AP courses on the map is that we never know when they're going to call and tell us that we need to make a change. So do you want to talk a little bit about it from the math perspective?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Ms. Downey. You always have great questions for the math department. As we sat here, or maybe 2 years ago, to one of the questions earlier, we were not aware of AP pre-calculus at that time. So we did have to pivot last year around this time to push off the analysis of pre-calculus and calculus, which, as you can see, those resources are quite dated, 2002 and 2007 respectively. So we've been doing just fine, as we'll get to in our performance report. But generally speaking, the College Board every 5 to 10 years will look at each of the APs and may make some shifts in curriculum and how the courses are being taught and assessed. And so obviously the addition of AP pre-calculus made that a priority for us, at least in the math department. But I know that my colleagues that are here from the high school have experienced similar types of things in each of their disciplines. So to your point, we're kind of at the mercy of the College Board, but we do want to make sure our students have the right resources and obviously can continue to perform at such a high level. So we try to get, many of us sit on a variety of listservs, and we try to get that information sooner rather than later so that we aren't surprised and our teachers aren't surprised about the changes that might be coming down the pike.
But so like with something like AP Calc, right? I mean, is this also that we're looking at what our materials are versus other schools, or, or the supplementary things as part of that process? Like,
very much so. And that will be the goal of the textbook committee. Just to pick on AP Calculus BC for a second, you know, we've had some revisions on the EP level since our book of 2002 was adopted. So we've done a really great job in-house working with that resource and having our teachers pull from other areas. But, you know, to have something that's really streamlined with the current tests would make their jobs a lot easier and probably would give our students even that much more of a leg up when they're performing on the exam. So I think moving forward, one of the things I appreciate about Mark is that we're looking ahead and we're trying to ensure that we're not caught in that position where we're trying to make something that, you know, trying to put that round peg in a square hole. So we've done that, and we've done it very successfully, as I've explained, but it's probably not the best process moving forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Kowalski.
I have a math question, but I don't think it goes to the high school, but in general, don't go nowhere yet. So I noticed that for K-8 purposes and the math program, we're reviewing it again in 2025, right? Internal audit of the program in 25 to 26. And then we have a selection of the program. Would we really want to jump from all the work that we've just done to implement the new math program in K-8 and then shift gears? Or is this like a placeholder just to see where we're at?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And for everyone that's listening at home, especially our educators, do not panic that we're switching off of Big Ideas Math. It's part of it's part of the natural cycle to allow the curriculum to be internally audited. We will look at performance. We will look at state and national standards. We will look at any internal and external factors that might cause us a need to do a full review. If there's no internal, external factors that would cause a need for review, we would renew our subscription to Big Ideas Math. And the idea is to stay current, ensure that the curriculum is responsive to student and teacher needs, and that our performance levels are where we expect them to be, and that the curriculum is responsive for that. Okay. Any other questions on the curriculum management plan? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, team. Perfect. You're up again, aren't you? Achievement data report. Mark, it's you again. Why did you shut that off?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I was wondering if we could do it the same way we approached the Summer Curriculum Institute, in that perhaps we could take our questions by level. So I can bring my elementary and middle school folks up to the table. And then once we finish elementary and middle school type questions, we'll have the high school team come up.
Well, if it's okay with the board, I'm going to pass control over to you again. Thank you.
Excellent. So team, come on up. I'll be playing the part of K-8 science coordinator this evening, so please don't ask the hard questions. So with me is Ms. Palladino, K-8 ELA, and K-8 Math, Mike Reed, and our 6A Social Studies Administrative Liaison, Thomas Healy, also known as the principal of Central Middle School.
Secondary job.
His day job. Mike, if you're listening, perhaps you could put the slide deck up just in case we need to refer to it. Mr. Antonaccio.
I'm getting it up now.
Thank you. Okay, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have on our presentation. Ms. Downey?
Always going first. Just kind of a comment at the start, and I just want, maybe some explanation. This health report was very appropriate to our strategic plan and really the metrics that we've used. My recollection is that in the past, we've gotten a lot more of the underlying data, and we've gotten breakdowns like school by school and just a little more meat for the board. And I just wanted you to kind of talk through the process of how you decided to do the presentation this way. And then also to just clarify kind of these 2023 targets. We set these targets, when we did the strategic plan, what dates, 22, 23, And maybe were some of our goals a little ambitious, which I think we talked about before we passed it. So if you just kind of could talk to those couple of more macro issues before we get started, I think it would be helpful for people listening as well as the board.
Thank you for the question. I'm actually going to let Dr. Jones kick us off on that one.
So, since I've been here, and so this is my 5th year, we've done it a little bit different every year based on your feedback and what the board has requested. So Karen Hirsch brought this up today. The first year that I was here, we did a big, long retreat, which you remember, on a Saturday. And it went for several hours at the library. The board has not been as excited to work on Saturday mornings for several hours, I think due to COVID and also just the amount of capital projects meetings that we've had. I mean, when you think about, the starting school this year, we've met, I think, 3 out of 4 weeks, we were preparing for meetings. So I think that's been part of it. We will have all of the school data on their websites tomorrow, at all of our schools. I will send those links to the board so that you can sit there and click through all of those. So you'll have that information for you. But if the board wants to go in a different direction, then you'd have to go back and look at the agenda plan when we get maybe our new board members on. If you want a different approach, we feed off of what you ask us to do.
And could you
Ms.
talk
Costa?
a bit about the 23, the numbering system, just kind of how, because it starts saying, well, is the 23 targets, were those 23, 24, just kind of talk through how we did the numbering.
Yeah, I mean, again, and it was tricky because you have to remember, we went 2 years without a strategic plan while we were building a strategic plan. And as a school system, you can't just sit back for 2 years and not, have any sort of target at all. So the 22 was actual. 23, we were setting those as you were approving the plan last year before we tested in 23. So, it's not surprising that some of them may not be exactly where we would like them to be because you're setting a target before you've even really implemented all of your strategies. So that's where we are. And I know Karen Hirsch had made the suggestion today that maybe we want to add another year and go out to 2028. So this is our benchmark year because we're implementing a lot of strategies this school year that weren't in place last year.
Ms. Kowalski?
So I was able to go on to the website and do data and pull it down by school to see the year over year and year by year grade, et cetera. So I've got those details. Obviously there are schools that are doing well and you're seeing progress, and there are other schools where we're not seeing progress. And I was curious, obviously, I'm sure you're aware of them. And the question I have for you is, what do we want to do? What are your intent to make changes in order to address those needs? And what are you seeing in those schools that are different? And how are you going to switch those negatives to positives? And some of them are, fairly, they're not huge negatives where we see some in the reading level, but down 12% from last year in a particular class. So I'm just curious as to how you intend to address that.
So I think the first thing I want to say is it's really important that we don't become too reactive to any particular data set. Our charge internally is we look class by class, student by student in our analysis of performance to try to determine whether or not there's patterns and trends that are emerging in a particular grade level or a particular school. It's the charge of each of the coordinators to then go out to those buildings and have conversations, not only with the teachers, with the building administration, participate in the building of their school improvement plan and their embedded actions within the plan and to address those particular needs. I'm thinking off the top of my head, Mr. Reed, that you might want to talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing in some of our Title I schools.
Sure. So we really go deep into this and we get very, very specific by building. In 2 of our Title I schools, I'll give you examples of what we're working on right now. I'll start with JC. We were fortunate enough to be able to hire another math interventionist there. So in particular, grade levels where we seem to be having a trend of a negative trend, we're appropriating our resources to those classes. And that school is small enough where we can even have a co-teaching model in some cases in certain grade levels every single day in mathematics. So that's a specific example at Julian Curtis. At New Lebanon, we're taking a hard look at the actual interim assessment batteries and what those are, the practice assessments that the state provides us for the SBA. And what we're doing is we're aligning those to the chapter assessments. So the students get more exposure in the digital platform so that when they take the test, it's not a novel situation to them. They have used the platform, which is identical to what they're going to take when they take the state assessment. And it gives us the same information that, say, a Big Ideas chapter assessment would give us. So what we do is we take a look to see where they correlate, where there might be holes. And then we figure out, can we swap the test out possibly, or can we supplement some of the questions to give the kids more exposure? At that particular school, we also have a 1.8 billeting for math intervention as well. So those are two very specific examples. The other thing that we're doing across the board in all three Title I schools is we've used a supplemental program called Number Corner, which is basically like a morning meeting that's math centric, and it focuses in on particular concepts and skills that we tend to not get to by the end of the year. I think we all know the age-old story. We don't get to measurement and geometry before the SBA because we're not going to rob Peter to pay Paul and sacrifice number sense and algebraic thinking to plug that in. So we do our best to fit it all in. But what Number Corner allows us to do is turn our morning meetings into more math-centric morning meetings. So we've rolled that out in all three Title I elementary schools. So the other higher performing districts, which have 75, sometimes 90 minutes of math, now we're grabbing an extra 15 minutes. So we've got 75 minutes of math, so to speak, in those schools. So, little adjustments, or you might want to call them major adjustments like that, are some of the things that we do very specifically at those schools to support that work.
Mr. Healy, I know you wanted to add something from a principal's perspective.
At least I thought.
I did. And I believe actually this was something that I spoke about last year too. So just to bring color to all of it, because this is what's happening in real time actually this week. So from a principal's lens, not my social studies liaison lens, we get this data, and what we're doing right now is actually what's great about the way that the district strategic plan and then the school improvement plans are operating together in alignment is we're going through our teacher goal setting right now. So that those meetings right now are actually looking at that data set and saying, okay, this was not where we wanted it to be. Why? And then we start to think about what happened last year. And then again, from working with our coordinator team, we're able to look at trends across schools, but also within the schools, and look at teachers ourselves and kind of see where there might be a positive trend, where there might be a flat trend, and start to try to dig into the instructional practice. I can speak specifically for Central. I think that we are looking for a much greater achievement number than where we were. So one of the things that we've started talking about is how we're using the individual student data to drive our instructional practice, and how to look at what past performance has been to question instruction that has been going on. So if we've been doing some of the same things and getting the same results, then obviously we should be doing things differently. I think now that we've got a few years out of COVID and we have all these wonderful targets, we're able to actually look at it in a meaningful way to take real action that we can be firm in changing the result. Whereas we sort of, I think, lost that for a little while. So what's been great, for example, just to bring the through line through, and then I'll pass it on, is I know, for example, Mike in math, Mr. Reed in math, brought in some instructional strategies for building thinking classrooms to our teachers, and changing some of the instructional practice and the way that students collaborate and discuss math and problem solving in the math classroom. We were able to look at the strategic plan and look at Mike's goals, Mr. Reed's goals, from that lens and then bring that into our school improvement plan. So if you look at Central School Improvement Plan, one of the strategies that we have for our math, it's actually for all of them, but specific to math too, is it talks about student collaboration and discourse. So now I happen to oversee the math department. So when I sit down with those math teachers in our goal setting meeting, I say, we're focusing on instruction this year. One of the things we're going to think about is how we leverage student collaboration and discourse in the classroom. And your action plan is almost a frequency goal of how often are you going to engage in these instructional practices in your classroom that we believe are going to change the way kids think and talk about math, and then therefore how they achieve and grow in math. And then they're going to set that teacher goal to say once a week or whatever it is, I'm going to do this new strategy. And then we come in periodically and give that feedback when we're giving those lessons to see what we see and track the student progress along the way. So that is how this all runs straight through. But Ms. Kowalski, to your point, that all starts with us looking at this and saying, what's going on here and what do we do with it? And then how do we address it head on, from the district plan down to the school plan, down to the individual teacher goals.
Right, because at the same time that all this data is coming out, we all got, as parents, right, our SBAC analysis, right? And we're seeing where, each parent is seeing where their students are scoring. So the question, say that again? The analysis, right, for certain grade levels. That too. And so I think what is important to understand from a parent perspective that's hearing all of this is that, do they need to be reaching out, if parents are concerned about where their students are scoring, right? If they're in a category 2 or barely in a 3, or if they're in a in a 1, because we do have those students, should they be reaching out to those schools independently? Or is the process that you're just talking about identifying those students and then adjusting their education plan going forward so that it's not a parent job, it's a teacher job?
Yes. So what I can tell you, and both, in ELA to Ms. Palladino and math for Mr. Reed specifically, all of our teachers in those areas have spreadsheets with every student, what level they were on SBA, and whether or not they met their growth target on SBA. And that's listed by student. And we actually have it over the last multiple years, at least 2 years. So I'm now an 8th grade teacher and I see Mr. D'Amico, Mark D'Amico scores, and I know, did he go from a 3 to a 2? Did he go from a 2 to a 3? Did he meet his growth 1 year over the other? And what happened? And then I can also go back to our teachers. And if I can see that something happened, I can have a conversation with last year's teacher or the 6th grade teacher and kind of get a sense of what's been going on with that particular student. So especially in the math and the language arts area over all 3 years, we are looking individually by student, not only on achievement level, but whether or not they met their growth. And we're having those conversations. And that's what in the teacher goals, they have to have 2 indicators for academic achievement, basically, and growth. The first one is related to achievement on those SBA tests, what percentage of your students are going to be able to get there based on the historical data, and then looking at growth. What percentage are, where are your students? How many have met growth? How many haven't? And what are you going to do to get them to meet their growth target? So they're literally looking at names across the board over time to make those goals and action plans each year.
Ms. Costin?
This is maybe a silly question. It's a 2-part question, and it begins with one to Dr. Mercanti Anthony. So when did the board vote on our strategic plan? What was I
believe it was February.
So in February, were we setting these targets of 63% for students on the ELA portion of so in other words, a month before they were taking the test, we're like, bam, you need a 90. So we didn't really have a direction to provide to our educators. We just sort of, we gave them a line to hit. And if you look at these charts, they look somewhat disheartening, because we see the target that we set like a month before the SBA. And, you know, we see growth. I see growth in the number of kids or percentage of kids who are meeting their growth targets on ELA and in math on the SBA. So just from a purely like looking at the dotted line, it doesn't look like a fair assessment of where we put the benchmark and then ask them to hit it. So I don't know if this was the best format for us to be gauging the targets that we were expecting. That's my small criticism. It's not really for Dr. Mercanti Anthony. I was just asking.
Dr. Mercanti Anthony.
So, yeah, so I think. So we have to confront the brutal facts, right? We set targets, the amount of strategic plan, and our students made progress. And, you know, by and large, in all of these metrics, we made progress. We fell short. We fell short of most of the targets, most of the achievement targets in year one of the plan. I think I mean, looking at the slide deck and things like that, I think that's probably the headline. Mark, is that fair to say? Or
I disagree because it hasn't even been a year.
It's been like a month.
folks, our achievement is not where it's supposed to be.
Oh, okay, wait, now I'm sorry, can I, yeah.
Mark, take charge.
Ms. Stowe, then Ms. Hirsch.
So I have to say, so I looked at the data and I was like, what are we talking about with these targets? And then in my world, I can't do anything without comps. Because to me, it's like if you look at a utility company or you look at a software company, those are going to have very different margins. And so then I sort of say to myself, these numbers mean nothing to me in a vacuum. So, and I wasn't on the strategic plan committee and I kind of just went with it. I'd argue a target of 100% in anything is beyond ridiculous, but we can go there for another time. So then I sort of said, I just want to know how everyone's really doing. And so I looked at the comps and I was truly impressed. And I'm happy you added these because I know we don't use these DERG A, DERG B terms anymore, but since I'm now, oh my God, the longest person on the board, Lord, we used to use them all the time. And I actually found them extremely helpful because you need to know your comp universe, right? Again, if I'm looking at a tech company going public, it's going to matter if they are, what size they are, what their market cap is. I'm going to look at different metrics, right? This is the same thing here. You have to look at your student body and we are not New Canaan. New Canaan has zero children in the reduced lunch program. I am very happy I moved here. I'm just going to say that I actually really appreciate our diversity of students. But when we actually did great completely on our DERG B, but even bumping up into DERG A against places like Westport and Wilton and New Canaan, which are very different places. So that's how I'm looking at the numbers. I know that the strategic plan is your baby. It again is not how I would run the numbers, but I'm going to look at the current data, how our kids are performing versus others. And, you know, we all know I love math, especially in math. We seem to be going in incredible places. And I have a lot of questions I want to ask about that. And that's selfish because some of the things I know our students are doing in math in terms of the fact that we're going for 75% in algebra. I don't even know how many years ahead that is anymore, but, you know, we're also adding things like honors linear algebra, which is a fourth year college class. So I might have a little bit of a different perspective, but I just needed to sort of say, if I were you, I would like to spend a little time on the comps as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stowe, for your comments. And we appreciate that because towards the end of the presentation, I give Dr. Jones credit for this. She really thought about bringing in the old DERG A, DERG B comparisons. And I think it's quite telling. And I think there's a lot to celebrate. And for those teachers that are listening, I hope they'll share with their colleagues. We're really proud of their efforts. And I think the students, there's a lot to celebrate in the back end of this report. And in one particular, which I'm going to steal from Ms. Palladino on page 43. This is an incredible sign that the curriculum management plan is being responsive to the needs of our learners, and it's starting to show the threads of success over time. And to look at our growth by way of comparison, to only be second to New Canaan, which again, we're not New Canaan, is quite impressive. And so I don't think anyone should gloss over these slides. And if it was me, I would pay particular attention to these slides, because it's quite telling that we're doing quite well in comparison to districts who have far less challenges than we do. Ms. Hirsch?
I had asked a lot of questions in advance because this is not typically
30 to be exact, but who's counting?
Excuse you, 31. But some of those were multi-part questions. So let's do our math. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, so I would like to just, I would argue, at least in the report, Dr. Jones sort of addressed it. We've received the achievement report in multiple different ways, looking at different data over the course of the years. And I think at least when I looked at this, my concern when I looked at this is we tie this achievement report specifically to the goals in our strategic plan, which is what we want to do going forward, but it also misses out on a lot of data. We keep, we've talked about this multiple times, at how we don't look at our students by one data point, right? We look at them, the SBA is a one-time, once a year, as you even mentioned, it is given in the spring before we finish and complete the yearly curriculum for that subject. We give other tests along the way. I know, because we already looked at that plan for the year a couple weeks ago. And so we look at multiple different points of reference for our students. This also takes into account, and I think this is a discussion we need to bring back to the strategic committee. We are not comparing apples to apples here. We're comparing fifth grade from year 1 to fifth grade year 2. You're not showing the growth of that particular grade. We're just seeing how fifth grade is doing. And I do think that we were so focused on making sure we got our strategic plan into place and getting our goals and making sure our educators and administrators had direction so that they could set the path forward for achievement, that we overlooked the fact that when we first started looking at it, the 23 date was probably a good starting date, but by the time we finally approved it, these tests were already taken. We didn't have them as a benchmark. And I think we should take this back to our committee, because I think the scores and data here is 23 is a benchmark to move forward. It should be 24 to 28, which I'd mentioned. But ultimately, I think the big piece that is missing, which is what Ms. Stowe said, is the comparison pieces, because when we looked at our achievement report last year, we saw a lot of growth in most areas. And it's hard to see that in this because we're looking at different data, which is why I sent a lot of questions. So anyway, so I don't want to dig in that, because I feel like our incredible administration has given us what we asked for, but this isn't how we're used to seeing it. And I think that's really the key here. And I don't know if you agree or disagree. We had a brief discussion about at least dates and stuff. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think when you did your presentation, if anybody else watched his glorious 23 and some odd minute presentation, there's information that you gave in that, and I highly recommend people do listen to it, that's not here, right? When you were talking about all of our SBA data at the very beginning of that presentation, you compared us to like districts. You compared us to where others in the state are, and we are achieving higher rates of success for our students than others. So, I think that there's a lot here that is missing to show the growth and the achievement that we're seeing, throughout the districts.
There's two quotes that come to mind. Show me a satisfied man and I'll show you a failure. But then also there's a great quote that says, don't throw out the good in pursuit of perfection. There's a lot of good in here. And I think each principal could sit before all of you and mine the positive results within their schools and from all of the hardworking teachers. And, I don't mind comparing us to other districts. I think that's actually critically important. I also think it's important to track matched cohort data, because then you are comparing apples to apples versus a fourth grade class from year over year. So I would be in favor of adding that into a future report. But also, you know, when you line up the schools internally, and I'll say this as a former principal of 15 years in this district, we worked really, really hard at Glenville School to improve performance year over year. But when you lined up the schools and we would come up fifth or sixth, I would always make sure that the next day after a board meeting to pull my staff together and remind them of how good they are and of the great work that they're doing, because somebody's always going to be in first and then somebody's always going to be in last when you line them up. But I don't want anybody that works for the Greenwich Public Schools to think that we don't value their efforts, because teaching is a really hard job. These scores are what they are. I will make no excuse for where we are underperforming. We need to do better. So we are not satisfied with several of the key numbers that came across. But that's the purpose of having strategic plans that are highly focused on school actions that are vertically aligned. So I'm quite excited about the future potential for what this report could be for all of you and for our community. But I certainly want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to really dig into the successes that the students were able to achieve last year. Ms. Kowalski?
So I think what would be really helpful is to, in fact, see that year over year growth from grade to grade, which you don't capture. Not a fault of it, but this data doesn't capture, right? It'd be nice to be able to say, okay, last year's fourth grade class to this year's fifth grade class, what is their growth trajectory? And then also get a sense of the percentage of kids. And I talked to Dr. Stacy about this last week, about those kids with an IEP, seeing what are the percentage of those kids that are making their growth year over year, because that's important, right? They may be scoring on these tests a 2, but that's irrelevant to the fact of their year over year growth. Are they hitting those targets for those students? That's important. And I think that would be helpful to see is, are we achieving in our individualized education programs for our students that year over year growth for purposes of, math and English, and what are the percentage of those kids? But it was also helpful to hear, obviously, Mr. Healy said about the individuals that teachers are going in and targeting those students that are struggling, right? There are clearly students that are doing well and they are succeeding, and there are students that are not doing well and they do need intervention. And the key part of, I think, in the beauty of Greenwich Public Schools is, in order to identify those students, early intervention, and help them succeed and put them on a plan to success early and often. Because I think that's been part of the problem in the past, which we haven't come in early enough, which is why I do like this math program and how the math interventionists and the reading interventionists are in. Because if we don't attack those at the elementary school, we have a problem in middle school, and we have an even greater problem in the high school. So I think that's the focus. And if the data we're getting here is giving us that direction that we can improve on, then I'm okay with that. And I think what would be helpful to the board is the year over year growth to make sure we're hitting our target numbers and we're not failing our students. I know we're not failing our students, but to see that, because I don't care what other districts are doing, quite honestly, I just care about our district and what we're spending our money on in improving our kids' education, because that's where I live. And that's what I think we need to see in here.
Thank you. Dr. Mercanti Anthony?
And I see Cody's hand is up there too. But I'm going to talk first. Look, I think we can debate the metrics and benchmarks and things like that. I don't think that's, honestly, I don't know how helpful that is. I think what we heard tonight from the administration, particularly in both of your comments, and Mike too, because Mike talked too, but what we heard really was, what I heard was really thoughtful conversation about how we're starting to do exactly what Karen was talking. We're identifying students where they are based on the data, to work with teachers and move them to work with teachers to move students appropriately. Mr. Healy, you talk more about instruction than I've heard in my 2 years on the board during your little 3-minute speech there. And so I've been trying to think about systemically at the board level, because we don't run the district, you guys run the district, systemically, what at the board level, what would be most helpful to support achieving these targets? Because we set the targets, we fell short, but we're moving in the right direction. So how can we do that? And I think, to with Dr. Jones' point earlier, I do think it speaks to our agenda planning, because I do think once a year, the one thing that I hate most about this report is it happens once a year. And I do think it is appropriate to come back mid-year and talk about, okay, so given all that data that we received there, and where we fell in the strategic plan, so what are we doing now? You know, in more of a detailed way, some of the things that Mike was talking about, you know, secondly, I think as a board, I think we need to have on the agenda specific conversations of what we're doing differently or at our Title I schools. This is a historic issue. We all know why there were more challenges there. So what are we doing there to support specifically? Mike talked a little bit about that too, but what are we doing as a district to meet those metrics in the strategic plan? I think building that into, and then there's a lot of work that the strategic plan committee can be doing too. The most exciting thing tonight is the alignment here, in that how each school's goals align to the goals of the district and things like that. We set a board goal of asking presentations to be aligned to strategic plan. So we told you to set it up this way. I know we did. And I had the same reaction as my colleagues. Oh, well, what about all the middle school data? And what about all the school by school data? So as an addendum, that probably makes sense, even though we did set it as a board goal to do exactly what you did. So we get that too.
Mr. Kittle, thank you for your patience.
How much dispersion do you see in the data between different teachers? Like, how much do teachers matter for the growth or achievement metrics? Do you guys look at it? I assume you referenced before that it's very granular. Do you look at it on a teacher by teacher basis? I'm interested, like, your best performing teachers versus the worst performing ones. How much of a gap is there? Or to ask that question differently, if every teacher performed the way that the best ones do, how much would these numbers move? Presumably up.
So I couldn't give you exact numbers, but to answer your original question, teacher effectiveness is the single most important factor in student performance.
More so than like Title I status or something like that?
Teacher effectiveness is the most important factor in student performance, more so than anything. So when we focus on adult actions, we look at what leveraged adult actions will produce the most significant gains in student performance, and highly prepared, highly effective teachers is the number one has been forever.
And so should more of our focus, I guess, should that answer shape what our focus is? Because it's just interesting, if teachers are the biggest deterministic factor in these scores, like so far this whole conversation, we haven't talked about in the like, I have no idea, you know, at different schools, the number of teachers that are actually, sorry, let me ask a more basic question. What achievement metrics would you look at? Is it the growth metric, like, you know, average
You would
amount
look
of
at the
per student taught, or what would you focus on for that?
A couple things I would look at are growth metrics, but I would also look at, you know, a teacher receiving a student who has taken a standardized test. Every student has a scaled score coming into that grade. So if I'm a fourth grade teacher, I could look at the scaled score performance of the student when they left third grade. And then my value add is dependent on how many scaled score points they increase during the time they're under my care. So there's two ways to look at teacher impact.
If I was curious to look into some of that data, is that data you guys have available or handy?
Dr. Jones?
It's not by teacher, no.
Can you anonymize it to make it by teacher? I'm less interested in the individual like which teacher, teacher A, teacher B, don't care, just in seeing it on an unlabeled basis, like teacher 1, teacher 2, teacher 3, and seeing how much dispersion there is. Is that available?
If you look at the school and you look at it by grade level, you can actually see what how much of the growth target they met. That tells you a lot because Kathleen Ramirez is online, and we were just talking about North Mianus over the last couple of days because their 4th and 5th grade is doing something really well because they're hitting mid and high 70s on their growth target. That is really, really good. Today I was looking at New Lebanon, who was, I believe it was their 4th grade. And again, really high, hitting that growth target. If you look at a grade level, and there are 2 or 4 teachers on every grade level, we would go in and drill down farther. But when you look at a grade level, and if they're not hitting that growth target, and again, all this growth data is new in Connecticut. It's new to everybody. And I think even for administrators, it's taken a while to understand how to read it. That's why we're having the conversation, I think, for you guys tonight, because it's fairly new. But you can actually go in and see what that teacher team looks like. And then the principal has that capacity to actually drill down farther and see, is one teacher just really, hitting the growth targets? Then we need to figure out, okay, what are they doing that might be different than a teacher who's struggling to hit the growth target with their students? But it's a very lengthy process.
Ms. Stowe?
What, Cody, are you telling me? Because I'm going in a different direction.
No, I mean, what I was curious about is there anonymized teacher data that's available that we can look at?
Jen Lau, that would be your question probably, but by where you actually, what he's asking is like what we did, like in Lincoln or something where it's anonymized, but.
You want to come up?
I would have to spend some time figuring out whether I can completely anonymize.
Jen Lau said we'll have to look into that to see if we can completely anonymize the data by teacher.
I'm guessing
So we'll
it's a contract issue or something for like actual performance to be attached to people's names.
Well, and I'm just going to throw it out there too, that again, the work we're doing pre-K through 12 is to try to drill down by every teacher for every student. And the last thing we want to do is start putting teachers like out publicly where they may be working on a skill set. We may have a 2nd-year teacher that may not be performing as well as somebody who's been doing this for 15 years, is a master teacher and a coach for their other colleagues. So there are so many factors that go into it. We may have a teacher who was out with cancer for half the year, had a substitute in that classroom, and does not have the same skill set if that teacher had been in the classroom for the full year. So we know a lot of really personal intricacies that you would never, if you put it out publicly, be able to even see any of that.
And I would also say that one of the major roles of the members of my team is that the principals do get the data by teacher. And so the principals reach out to my team to provide additional support to teachers who may need additional professional development. And so we deploy our coordinators to co-teach, to model, to pull out and mentor. So again, in terms of providing it to the public, that's for future consideration by the superintendent. But internally, we are tracking every teacher's performance, and the role of the principal is to advocate for support for teachers who may be in need, and we provide it.
Right. I guess the role I would think would be more focused on the students than the teachers, and the teachers are just a corollary. But yeah, I guess it's just really interesting because a lot of the conversation we've had around achievement, I mean, even the basic, I've heard the premise put forward before that Title I is, the driving factor in the underperformance of some schools. And you just said that it's actually teachers, and teacher quality is a much higher factor. And I feel like the data be really interesting if we're trying to understand what is driving achievement differences and what's driving achievement improvement. Even something like knowing is, you mentioned if a teacher's been there for 15 years versus 2 years, well, maybe a school that's falling behind as to less tenured of a group of teachers, or one has a lot more. I mean, there's different, it's kind of pulling out the factors that there's some that are within our control and some that are without. But it just strikes me, I mean, Kathleen's been using a lot of company analogies, like it's hard to look at the profits of a bunch of divisions and say, oh, but we're not going to talk about who runs each of those divisions. And if we have that data, again, I don't think it matters to put the names on it. It's more about there's findings. If you anonymize it and pull it out, I'd be very interested to see how that stuff relates. The only other comment I'd make, back to what Mike said, is the whole point of these is just on these targets and stuff. It doesn't matter what target you set. The point of having a target is just to have something that says, okay, our status quo is not hitting this. We need changes to the status quo, and driving everything around the way we talk about everything, whether it's a new textbook or a new curriculum change or whatever, that it should tie to some quantitative measurable thing. And we should be able to say a year from now, everyone sounds very defensive talking about all this. It shouldn't be, we're trying to make things sound good or bad. It should just be, well, we tried something, we thought it would have an impact. It didn't have a measurable impact, or it did, right? And I think that's the key thing for everyone to keep in mind with how these goals are actually useful. If it was just like, oh, we set the goal and we try to get it, then we should set all the goals at 100%. But I think it's that's not what these are for. So that was just a side comment.
Thank you, Mr. Kittle. Ms. Stowe?
Gosh, I'm weary of time and we're still on elementary, but so just real fast, is 70
Sorry, Mr.
algebra, 75% of our students, I really don't remember this one. Is that a year ahead?
That's 1 year ahead, 1 year of acceleration.
Okay. So, I mean, maybe, and this is going to go back to you, Tom. I mean, so Eastern's basically there, right? And so now Central and Western, is that an achievable goal? We think so? Does it make sense for our students to be 75% of the student body to be a year ahead in math? Like, those are the sort of obvious questions one has to ask themselves, right?
So if you were to read articles and things about this, the sort of, there's not really a consensus, right? I mean, we believe in Greenwich that we want to remove all possible hurdles to let kids and help kids accelerate as fast as they possibly can. When this goal was sort of, I guess, set in 2012, I think was the first time we sort of saw it, or we were able to figure out when it was. I don't know exactly why that was the number and why it was set that way, but I, in fact, have sort of built everything off of that number, because if you think about it, if we want our kids to be through algebra by the end of 8th grade, that means we would expect all of our kids to be a year, or 75% of our kids to be a year ahead. Theoretically, you would then say, well, then 75% of our kids should be at a level 4 on the SBA, right? And so if you look at it through that lens, you might say to yourself, maybe this is a bit of a lofty goal. Maybe we are pushing kids through too fast to get them to some certain standard. But that being said, what I do know is with our new program, with the compacting, we're no longer skipping content. Kids may be getting it at a faster pace, but they're not missing anything. Whereas historically, I think you all have heard me say before, they used to just sort of skip 6th grade math, which we all know is the most important math, kind of the math you do as an adult on a daily basis. So that's a really hard question for me to answer. But, what I do know is I do agree with the philosophy in the district that we shouldn't be holding anybody back. We should be trying to allow kids to accelerate within reason, if the data supports it, to get to where they need to go, or where they aspire to be, or where their family aspires for them to be. But, I think it is, it's definitely a lofty goal. You can see the data there. We had 62% enrolled in algebra, but only 58% passed with a C or above. So, we're still quite a ways away from successfully meeting that goal. So that is a very lofty, what's called a stretch goal to get there. And, we'll just continue to work to get there if that's what the board wants to see.
Yeah, I think Mr. Reed is being polite. This is a widely contested topic in the math world, and perhaps Dr. Mercanti-Anthony at Research Ed, you might bring someone or two people in to debate both sides. compacting certainly is our short-term solution to the low number of students who are passing Algebra 1, because to me, I don't think 58% is a very high success rate. I mean, if we're identifying kids who we believe are ready for this level of math, but they're not achieving a C or better, I think we should be asking ourselves the hard question. Maybe we're accelerating kids who aren't quite ready for Algebra 1. And are we setting them up for a tough track going on to the high school? Just my 2 cents on that. Any other question, Ms. Hirsch?
Well, this is just sort of to help wrap it up. I know you said you want to wrap it up, but arguably this discussion we're having now and this report is probably the most important thing that we do, is focusing on our students and their achievement. So this is not a topic to rush through in any given sense, especially with the incredible amount of administration and staff that is behind every single data point in here. But that being said, I do think it begs the question, because a lot of the questions that people are having are here based on, are we looking at the right data? Right. And I think that's something that, in order to not drag this out all night and ask questions, because we're not sure what we want, is to bring this back to the strategic plan committee to sort of have that as a discussion. And maybe I'm not the chair, but I would still like to suggest that when we have this discussion, we invite Mr. D'Amico along to share some of his input too.
Well, we've got huge amounts of brain power in the room right now. And we're utilizing that, but we also, in moving along to cover a lot, because the conversations that we're having now, we still have access to all these people as board members to call them and ask questions. We're just trying to give a taste of this to the public so they understand that we do question these things. So we can move along in a timely manner. Not that we want to exclude anything, because we could still have access to all this wonderful brain power that we have here in the room.
So I think with that said, we'll transition and bring up the 9-12 folks to answer any high school related questions you have regarding achievement. Thanks, everyone.
While they're transitioning, Mike, I want to go back, Dr. Mercanti Anthony, back to your question. I think one of the big things that the board can do to help, as you know, every November, we present the budget. And if we truly believe in the work that we've set out in the strategic plan, we cannot have 2% budgets. It just doesn't work. We've added more than 200 special education students. We need more teachers. We have a request to have EL co-teaching. You know, we have to make sure our textbooks don't get 10 years old, that we keep our curriculum money there. So to me, that's a huge part of the board. And I really hope that when we bring you the budget that we really need, that we can get an 8-0 vote on the resources that we need, because it's critically important.
Good point. Thank you. Mark, are you ready?
I am ready.
Take over.
Questions for the high school team? Is that that's hesitance? Dr. Mercanti Anthony, where would you like to begin?
Time at these meetings, as everybody rolls their eyes. So I was looking at slide 11 because I'm wondering about high school performance, and I know the essay. I do not want to get into the weeds about the SATs and computer written and all that. But I am wondering about slide 11, because if I recall correctly, this isn't everybody, right? So, but this is just high needs 11th graders, right? So where were we? So we remember how did our numbers fare when you take into account everybody in a whole? Do we know that offhand? I'm sorry I didn't send that question, because I'm wondering if they were as stagnant, for lack of a better word.
Give us a couple minutes. We'll pull that number up.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the math had a similar pattern. So I guess it speaks to what we're doing differently. And I know it speaks to, I think it speaks to Dr. Jones's point, and it also speaks to
Sorry to interrupt, but it's on, the answer's on page 16.
Is it on page 16?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed it.
All 11th grade students percent met exceeded benchmark SAT math achievement. Oh, sorry, I'm focused on math again.
So
Miss Lau, if you want to come up to the mic, that'd be great. You can even have my chair.
No. I'm only going to be here for 10 because I had asked the same question in advance. this is written this way because this is our goal in the strategic plan. So that was the data that was included. No, I'm just commenting since while you were pulling up, instead of putting, I was, biding time for others.
Yeah, okay. In 2019, the ELA was at 82.3. In 22, it was 77.7. And in 23, it was 76.8.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 1 down, 1 point. Okay. All right, so flattish. Fair to say. So I am wondering about the conversation, this and with these scores, then that should trend in relation to our conversation last month around progress monitoring and identifying where students are and whatnot, because I can't help but wonder if that trend is more of it's not a Johnny can't read. Is it less of a not a Johnny can't read issue, but is Johnny reading a grade level below? And do we know that? So, for example, how do we know in our current 9th graders, do we know what percentage of them are reading on grade level? Because I know we know that in 8th grade and 7th grade, kind of, but state scores. But when we get to 9th and 10th grade, when ELA traditionally switches over to literacy, is that an possible explanation here? And I know that speaks to the curriculum work we're doing here in high school. So I guess I'm wondering if we have enough progress monitoring in the high school to identify not the special ed students, we know who they are, not the dyslexics, but the students who are 1 grade off, and we know where they are, or 2 grades off. And is that something, and how we can remediate that? Is that the possible explanation for this data trend? That was a lot, I'm sorry. And I don't necessarily expect a line, but I do think wonders about if we need, speaking of resources, if we need more progress monitoring sophomore, I can tell you, I don't like to do comparisons to other schools. But I know there are lots of districts that we test everyone in 9th grade. To make sure and find out where they are on a grade level. The question I asked last month was, do we test newcomers, students that are coming in? And I don't think we do as part, and the answer I got was we don't, people that screen in. So if students are new to the district, how do we know they're not coming in a couple grade levels below? I'm wondering, and it might be, and it's a budget issue, but I'm wondering if we have enough data to meet kids exactly where they are when they get to the secondary level, kind of what Mr. Healy was saying about in the middle school, where we have that data because of the state test, but we don't test every year in high school. I thought that was a question.
Yeah, I think it was more of a wondering. What I would say is Ms. Berry would be happy to talk to some of the strategies that we're employing in order for us to improve the high needs numbers. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we've come up with?
Sure. I would say one thing about the reading score. It is the test that those kids were taking is a reading score that tests reading across the disciplines. So on that SAT test, there were always 6 passages. 2 were science and natural science, 2 were social studies, social science, and 1 to be literature. 1 more, the 6th passage would be a combo for either the science or the social studies. So it really is reading across the discipline. And in that light, we are working across disciplines in terms of supporting students. Mr. Healy, I think, laid out very well what we're doing to follow students' progress. But we're doing the same thing. This target for us is new. We were looking at all students, and now we have identified this target of high need students. We hadn't looked through that lens before. And now teachers really critically are. So we, right in the very first days of school, looked in Linkit. So each teacher could look at their own students. We can look and link it at which kids in the classes are high needs. We can see right where they are. We're seeing all the scores they have. So if you're a 9th grade teacher, you can see all the 8th grade scores for that student, see where they are and see which students are low, and low for the class and low for the targets of the SAT. So if you're a 10th grade teacher, you can see what they scored in 9th grade on their practice SAT. So we have those scores. Teachers of juniors right now, who will be the ones taking that test, can look at the 9th and 10th grade PSATs. They can see the high needs kids, see the growth. They know the kids in their class right now who are the high needs kids that we have to focus on. And we are doing that across the board. PLCs, collab groups are looking at those kids and targeting those kids. That is, as Mr. Healy mentioned, in the goal setting meetings, that's in every teacher's plan. Every teacher has benchmarks that identify and in their plan, they have to track the student's progress. And the second part of it is the targeted subgroup. So for our teachers, it's a high need subgroup, and then we work with those. Ms. Kowalski, do you want to ask something?
So how does that work in practicality on a daily basis? So let's say this is your classroom and Mike and I are your high needs kids and you're teaching a class and you have them, once a day. And it's a class that's occurring that often and it's 53 minutes. What are you doing? What are the teachers doing to address the fact that we are high needs in comparison to everybody else to get them on target? How are you structuring your class in a different way so that they are getting that attention?
We do have a number of things that we're trying. One thing is we do have a number of co-taught classes. So we have additional teachers in there. This year, for the first time, we are going through, we're instructing the special ed teachers in the SAT. They really didn't have a very sharp sense of what the SAT required and actually how their own kids had done on the SAT, and they do now. The same thing with the ELL teachers. That's another part of the high needs category. So we are supporting those teachers with the co-teaching. We also, the teachers are aware of those students, or they're monitoring their progress in their PLCs. Are saying, what can we try? We're not seeing growth. Teachers can work with those students in the learning centers, and in Flex, we're trying to support in those ways. Anything I'm forgetting?
I would also add that one of the things that we're going to focus on at the high school moving forward as a team is there's 3 ways you approach helping students who may be underperforming in your class. You look at content, process, and product. Those are the 3 ways that you modify your instructional approaches to meet the needs of students of varied levels. So as we start to work as a team at the high school level, we're going to start talking about how would you go about approaching modifying the content for students, or the process, the way you're instructing the student, or what the product is that you're expecting of students. So perhaps there's a performance-based assessment that you're going to give to everyone in this class, but the 2 of you, based on what we know about your past performance, will get a different performance task. So looking at those 3 key elements are always the kind of the gold standard for approaching the way to differentiate your instruction in a class.
In our upcoming staff development, the early release in October, we are going to have teachers take a module of the SAT and see how they do. They really are familiar with the test, and then get in interdisciplinary groups. And the question will be, how are you preparing your students in the class for this test? What are you doing in your questioning techniques and your follow-up in the alignment of your tests to help prepare students for this test?
So then my other question to this is obviously from a family perspective, right? So you could be, we are identified as high needs kids, but we don't have an IEP. We're not in special education. We've never tested in that capacity, but we do need help. And we've always been perceived as, well, we're just the C kids, right? We're getting straight C's, but we're going through and we're seeming to do fine. But you identified us as high needs. How is there transparency to the parents, our parents, to say, okay, we've identified your kids as high needs. This is what we're going to be doing. Here is support at home that you could think about, or this is what we're going to be doing differently in school for your children, so that if those parents want to participate from a home perspective in backstopping what the educators are doing in the classroom, how do they know how to do that?
I want to take a step back and talk about the definition of what high needs is in terms of high needs encompasses children who have special needs or are free and reduced lunch or English language learners. So I just want to be careful on how we pursue this conversation around high needs. I think what you're asking is something different than that.
You're talking about students that need support that are not meeting their growth targets.
Exactly. Let's change
Right.
it up that way. That's where I'm headed.
So Lucy, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
There are things our teachers are doing in class throughout the year that are meant to support all students. regardless of whether we classify them as high needs. For instance, in social studies, the teachers are, regularly going to include SAT-like questions on assessments, whether they're formative assessments or unit assessments. We've given teachers, the actual stems of all the questions that kids will experience on the new digital SAT. So teachers are going to be able to actually use those question stems to create questions attached to small passages that they'll be able to use on those assessments. So kids will become familiar with those questions, get a lot of practice with them, understand what those stems mean, because some are, quite challenging or very unique. Also on our midterms and finals, for instance, in social studies, 30% of the test is going to be SAT-like questions. So those students will have practice there as well. And that will be data for teachers to dive into to see, where kids are deficient and need additional practice. In PLCs, they'll also discuss this data and what other strategies they can try.
Can I add one more thing to that? When we look and link it at a teacher looks at his or her students, you can see the high needs kids, but you do see all kids. So if we're looking for our targeted subgroup, the kids that perform the lowest, they're not going to say, well, this kid's not special. They're going to target. We're trying to improve all kids. The focus of getting at the high needs kids, because they've been lower, is exciting for teachers because it's a worthy focus. But a kid maybe not be in those categories is still going to get that attention because we see their scores.
One of my hopes for the high school moving forward is that we're going to be able to look at, explore, and leverage pre-assessment data. Because when you have the opportunity to pre-assess students before you go into a unit, then you have a better understanding of readiness levels across your class roster. And then that's when you can take the instructional approaches of differentiating the content for students who may not be ready for a particular skill. So adding the layer of pre-assessments to the high school approach for instruction, I think would be beneficial moving forward, because when you only look at summative data, it's too late. You can't intervene at that point. So I'm hoping that moving forward, we can take the summative data and the summative assessments, and you can flip it and create a pre-assessment that you can give to the kids before you intervene instructionally. And then from there, you can start developing different pathways for students. And to me, I think that would be incredibly beneficial and powerful at the high school level. Ms. Hirsch, I'm going to move it along, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Hirsch.
So this may not be a question to be answered tonight, but I would like to pose it anyway. For those of us who are living in the worlds of SAT and standardized testing, which colleges are not really using as much anymore, supposedly, we use it as a state testing, for all 11th graders, and it doesn't go towards their GPA, but it is something we use as part of a graduation requirement as one of the levels, right? So I understand that why we're using that as a data point, but I would also argue, and this is not for tonight's discussion, but I'd love to have an offline conversation as to why we are very focused on the SAT as a data point, which is fine, but arguably, if you go in and you read through those SAT questions, especially in reading and writing, they're purposefully built to confuse the student taking it. They are not straightforward. The ACT questions are straightforward, and it is, you have to know the information. You have to boom, 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 get through. SAT does it very differently. It's just a different type of testing philosophy. And so when you're looking at students with needs in language arts, and they're being asked questions that can be purposefully confusing, it can skew the data in some ways. And so if we're changing the way our testing on midterms and finals are to meet the way questions are asked on the SAT, I'm not sure if that meets. So this is not for tonight, but it's just, I'm putting it out there because it is a very interesting educational philosophical question that it's been discussed, not here, but even beyond, as to when they're looking at these states, these standardized tests. Sorry, don't hate me.
Could I quickly answer?
Sure.
I just do want to reassure you, when we are looking at questions, we're in some sense, we understand the basics, so we're not asking convoluted questions to align. We're asking, what's the main idea here? Or which of these best represents the main idea? What's the best piece of evidence? Those are the kind of questions, especially you're seeing on the new SAT. They're simple and declarative, so we're not trying to shape our curriculum to be confusing as we may have seen in past SAT.
Also, I'd like to add that, we've always used multiple choice questions on assessments. So we're basically, tweaking, updating these questions so they appear more like an SAT type question. Again, the same type of stems, small passages as opposed to a longer passage, et cetera.
Well, hopefully some of these changes will then make it easier for these students to take SAT and find it less confusing but that's why I said it's a
Thank you,
discussion
Ms.
for another
Hirsch.
night.
Well, may I, any
Any other-
question that begins with this might not be for tonight, I'm going to move it on. That's okay. Thank you.
Miss Downey?
Yeah, I want to jump to APs because I got to tell you, I thought the data was great. And I think kudos to you all that we have both increased the number of students and increased the number of students getting 3, 4s, and 5s. I mean, because normally when you'd increase the pool, you'd think it would bring the scores down. So I just kind of want, I think we like to talk about good news. I think this is great information. I think there's a lot of kids taking AP tests, taking many AP tests, and the scores are improving. So I just wanted to kind of give kudos to that and just kind of ask, do you think there's ever a point at which we max out on the number? I mean, this is just kind of a curiosity that, you kind of reach a point of how many kids can take them successfully, or do you think as we're having success, like big ideas, that the kids have greater math skills at the lower grades? Does that translate into maybe more kids taking pre-calc, calc, BC calc? Just kind of any thoughts on that, or a game, ideas?
Personally, it's great when we can have students challenge themselves and participate in AP class. The research there is really outstanding. Students who take an AP class and their transition to college and success of graduating from college is one of those pieces of data that's irrefutable. So I agree with you, Ms. Downey. We really want to try to get as many students as we can to have that experience before they graduate. And I know that at Greenwich High School, as you saw in the newspaper not too long ago, we're looking at not only AP classes, but some of the ECE courses as well as another pathway for those students. So, the good news is, at least from the math department, we're going to have 200 more APs taken next year with AP calculus. So our number of almost 400 is going to be almost 600 next year. So I'm excited about that, but also comes with some of those kids who didn't complete Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Now they'll have access to an AP, and that's a first for all of us. So as I know, many districts have pushed back on that. I'm glad that we have it and that we're making that available to more and more students. But my hope is, as Mr. Reed gets those numbers up in middle school, we'll hopefully see even more students, at least at the math level at the high schools, enjoy that opportunity.
And I don't see us maxing out. We have more and more kids taking our AP Lang, for example. Our number is amazing. What I do think is also something to celebrate is kudos to the kids. A number of these seniors take the tests, having been told by their college, we're not going to accept your score, your credit. And they go in with gusto and bring us the 5s or a good score. And I think that's something that I really do celebrate.
Ms. Stowe?
I mean, I have to ask you a question, I guess, Sean, because, everyone else has had a chance to speak. So, so on science APs, I mean, I don't know, how do we add more? We're taking physics, and there was that the only class where there was a slight drop, but there was AP, but it's AP Physics C. So how many, I have a question. How many kids even take that? I mean,
so last year there were 32 students that took it. This year there are 31 students that are taking it. So, but I think the more impressive thing is to look at how the scores rebounded from last year. So, we did an analysis at the beginning of the year last year on our scores, and we took a deep dive and to identify how could we do a little bit better. And in one of our AP Physics C courses, so they basically take two of the AP classes in 1 year. And for one of them, students were averaging in the high twos. And so we really looked at how we were implementing the curriculum. And I have to give a lot of credit to our AP Physics teachers who came up with the idea of, let's teach one of the unit that they're really struggling in. Let's flip flop that and teach that first. And it had a significant kind of effect on the students, where they were really challenging themselves at the beginning of the year with the hardest content and really persevering through that stuff and moving at an accelerated pace, because then they still have a very small amount of time before the AP test to go and finish the other half. And they basically set a record on the score. And so we were very proud of the reflection of our teachers, and then the implementation and being able to utilize the resources that we have to make sure they're being very successful. In regards to adding other classes, that might be a discussion for another night. You know, we do have there are different AP science courses, but there's not an extensive amount that would allow for the other, like, for example, one of the other ones that is out there is AP Physics C. AP Physics 2. But that one is not really, a lot of students don't sign up for that. They typically go into AP Physics C right after that. But the goal would be to really focus on getting increased numbers in our AP Chemistry courses, AP Bio courses, having more students. We've had a significant increase in our AP Environmental Science courses and our AP Physics 1. So again, our teachers doing a great job and really focusing on challenging our students and making them prepared for those assessments and really doing a great job. So we're really proud of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add a comment and a kudos to a teacher teaching AP Physics currently. I know she was one of those people that went to St. Louis and graded the AP exams last year. And so she did say at the open house, that's somehow going to make her even better at teaching AP this year. So it just, the fact that teachers are doing that you're averaging at 4.5 and they're still looking to get that number up is just incredible. So thank you.
Mr. Kelly, I believe I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you for
all
your
coming.
support.
Thank you all for staying so late. Thank you all for your hard work. Thanks.
And thank you for all you do to help our students achieve. Just, since that's the name of our plan there.
And Mark, thank you very much. You were very good. Okay, Dr. Jones, climate survey. That's you, right? Fantastic. So uncertain on the city. They waited all day to be here to do this. They barely said it. And they so unceremoniously should give them something. Go to bed. But give them lollipops or something. Because they're just, I don't know. You just feel bad. Yes.
So if you look on page 26, that's where it's part of the report that you just were looking at. The first one is our family and community engagement. And, our target was 87% of families will respond positively. And page 26 is where the first page starts. And when you look at page 27, we're already there this year at 87%, and this was supposed to be 2027. And when you turn to the next page, I think, there's a lot to celebrate here. And again, the team that was all here, give them a tremendous amount of, celebration, because when you talk about welcome partners in your children's learning, and you've gone from 62% to 92%, that's huge. That is a tremendous increase. And I think part of that is the way that they're working with our families to get all of this curriculum information, on the web. They work so closely with the PTA, all of the principals. And the other piece is just the number of workshops, which I know some of you probably don't read the Friday note I send, and some of you probably do. But the ones that do, you'll see almost every week there's a workshop out there for parents in all different areas. So I think our parents are feeling like we're really supporting them them. Adding the second conference was very well received in elementary. And we'll see this year we're doing it in middle school. And again, the parents were supportive for that. So we'll see how it works. But again, in the last one too, how confident are you in your ability to support your child's learning at home? It's really important. And again, it's to all of the resources of what we're doing. And I think if parents don't feel like they can help their children at home, especially in the early grades, it often, by the time they get in high school, some parents struggle to do calculus. They haven't done it in years and years. But you look for the resources in the school. But I think that's really important. So we're thrilled with this. And Jen just left, but it was a very, very strong, a lot of our parents take the survey.
Michael.
That was my question. Did we have a sense of the sample size?
Yeah, I wish I had it in front of me. I'll get that to you, but it's a lot. We have a really good rate of return. And about 4 years ago, we stopped sending out where it was the original panorama was so long that, people start to click through it and then they're like, I'm done. Where now we keep it relatively short. It's very targeted. So people will finish it. And we tell them when we push it out, this should only take X amount of minutes. And it really does only take that long.
We get a lot of people who come to board meetings who start by saying, parents are saying this, parents are saying that, parents are saying this. I think slide 28 here, when I saw it, is an incredibly important slide. Just so, well, hey, you know what? 92% of parents are feel like they're welcome partners in their child's learning. I mean, I think this is something that we need to point to was real hard data. It's terrific.
Yeah, I agree. Our principals out in the buildings, teachers, everyone is working so hard to really, be a partner with our parents. And we do listen. And I will say, even just listening to the high school now, and, you're talking about student achievement, and they didn't even mention like a lot of the programming we have at the high school to support students, the MTSS process that we have, that is across the district right now. And it's just going phenomenal. We've never had that before. That came from listening to parents. Our special education action plan, it was our parents who were saying our intervention system as a school system was broken. And it is now, we've got it K-12 and we're continuing to grow that. So I think we're listening to the feedback they're giving us.
Reddish Public Schools are awesome. Christina.
Thanks. So I would like to hear about the sample size and if we had a breakdown of like elementary versus secondary, if we have that I just think it'd be instructive to understand. I also wanted to just kind of ask, this is fabulous data, but there's a bunch of other questions, right, that the parents are asked. So what do we do with that data? Because it's not reflected. I mean, and obviously here we were talking about what tied into the strategic plan were those 3 questions, but there's other questions and what are we doing and what are we doing with that information?
So the principals actually, we start in the summer and, with the results, we talk about it at our Leadership Institute as a school system, and then they all take their data and really drill down. And again, it's everything they've said tonight. It's part of their school improvement planning as they prepare for the year. And whether that's the metric for the parents, whether that's the staff metric, if you have a building where staff maybe aren't as cohesive and you've got a low metric, you're going to talk about that with your staff and then start to put in strategies. And the same way for the parents. So they go through the detail portion of it.
Okay, thank you.
Next, page 29 is the student belonging. And again, this is something that's been very intentional. We definitely want our students more connected to our schools. It's highest, if you could see it broken out, it's highest in elementary, goes down a little bit in middle. And of course, by the time you get to high school, it's a little bit lower as well. I would like to see a bigger result from our high school more students take it, where middle and elementary are more prescriptive about, okay, everyone's going to take it right now. So I think that's an area that we can improve on just from our GHS students, getting more of them to actually take it. It is important. And again, we gave an example this summer at Leadership where one of our buildings, and it was North Street actually, they were not happy with their result from 22. So last year, they met with all of their students individually. They really talked about their individual goals, had a real targeted effort to make sure that the students knew there were people that cared about them, that they really cared about how they were doing, and had one-on-one conversations. And their results were just like so different in 23. And it was because of a real concerted effort and the strategies that they put in. So we shared that also with the admin team. The next one is page 31, flipping over there to the school climate for staff. And again, we want to keep this trending up. And I think this is also supported by what we saw with the very low turnover rate of our staff compared to a lot of school districts around us. I think, we're supporting them. They have great resources. We're giving them strong professional development. And I think they like that. And probably the one metric that we were the proudest of was the very one at the top, that's 83%, what extent they feel trusted to work in the way they think is best. And that just says, they feel like we're working with them and we are partners at the table. And the interesting thing always on the teacher survey is when you get to the lower end of the percentages, how positive are the attitudes of your colleagues? It's not their own personal attitude. It's, how others are around them. And when new initiatives are presented, how supportive are your colleagues? And those, if a building is lower, then that would be something a principal would really be tackling. Why is this in our building? Why do we not feel like we're positive about, one another or the colleagues? So, but again, we're very, very happy. And this is on the Q&A, Karen. Do you remember the number? It was like 880 something out of our 950 took it. So very, very strong, again, rate of return. GEA really helps promote it because we want as many of our teachers to take it as possible.
Karen, go ahead.
So with respect to the lower numbers on those questions 5 and questions 10, right? Is there a shared concern and then number 10 specifically, right? Is these new initiatives, do you think this is driven by like new programs or new things that are being taught and then teachers not having enough time or professional development to prepare, and then they feel rushed in presenting in front of class? Why do we, what are we thinking these are low? Why are we getting these low numbers? Like,
I think it's, it's several different things. I think what you've just referenced, that we've done so much over the last couple of years. They have a lot of new out in the buildings, especially when you look at literacy, you look at middle school, all the rollout last year of social studies and the whole humanities. But on top of that, the other thing that can happen when you're looking at it from a district perspective, we have 15 buildings. We may have a real kind of challenge in 1, 2, 3 buildings, and it brings your average down as well. So you really need to go in and look at each building and see where they're sitting. Because some buildings, when you're talking about your staff survey, you get different results from different buildings.
Oh,
Karen.
so that's why I know I had asked if we would get a little bit more, information on the other questions that were asked. And just a little bit better breakdown. So will we be able to get that at some later date?
So all of the surveys for the schools will be on their website tomorrow. And I'll try to remember either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday to send them all the links. I'll go out so you have all 15 of the links and you can go right in and look at every school.
I did ask Mike, who's probably listening, if he can maybe make a PDF for us. But no, this is great. The results we're seeing are fantastic. But yes, I mean, when we're talking about our staff surveys, I know one of our strategic plan goals is to support our educators and their connectivity to our schools and overall feeling of happiness being in our schools as well. Just in case you guys didn't know, it was 881 of our staff members responded to the survey, because I had asked that earlier. But I do think it would be very helpful. And I guess we will see it with a breakdown to see elementary versus middle versus high school. Because I know, we're asking different things of teachers at different levels. So I think it's important for us to know, you know, where our teachers are feeling needs and at what levels of school. So thanks.
Okay. Done? All right.
To do that section we didn't talk about.
No, never do the section we don't talk about.
Ready for capital budget.
I'll leave that. Okay, I guess Blaze is up. Where's Blaze? We're moving to capital. Oh, is he in person? We get to see Blaze? How cool is that? I had things. Blaze, we get to see you in person. Third. Nice. Of course. Yeah, before. Just before. Budget submissions. Yes. Then I have the final one. I've already been the swear in. When the swearing happens, I'm out. Big paper.
Where's Karen's? Where's Sharon's?
But before we get started, do we do the request for that 175? We still, we're too busy. That's fine. It's in a rush. I'm just asking. I'm not rushing, I'm just asking. That's it. Because I feel it's on me, so I want to put it onto you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's basically.
Yeah, well, we'll talk tomorrow. I will maybe next week. You got a lot on your plate. I fully understand. Yes. No, just give me. Hey Blaze, this is what I would like to do, and hopefully my colleagues agree. What I'd like you to do is go what we're proposing and then back and ask questions about how you got there. Thank you. No. Give us the general proposal, what we have, and then we'll go, how did we get there? Let's break it up into how we got there based on questions. That makes sense?
Wanted to ask.
So Blaze, we'll begin. What we'll do is what our proposed capital budget is. Please present that first, and then we'll ask questions on how we got there.
Sure. Okay. Can you hear me? All right. So before you are two things. So since the last meeting we had our first capital plan, which is the big document here. This is the 15-year. We did our initial review line by line of every draft project, and all the proposals. What we posted yesterday now, are the project sheets. The project sheets are for everything that has a fiscal year 20 5 request. You only do project sheets for the items that you're going to have a requested appropriation for. So Kim, Dan, myself, and Dr. Jones, we've gone through systematically and put together project sheets with additional information on each appropriation request. A few things kind of, most of it is largely the same. There's been slight adjustments in as we've gotten better information on programs. We went through a few programs that we're doing studies on. You'll see that we have a slightly better number on ADA, for example, and I have an update on that, which I'll give in a second as we go through our program.
When you say better, you just mean more accurate, not lower.
Yes.
Just to
Thank you.
clarify what better is.
Yeah, depending on who's looking at it, I would say a more accurate number. Yeah. And I'll go through a couple of the high level projects in a second and take some questions. The other item is Central Middle School. When the board passed the interim funding request at the last meeting, took it off this version. That's for discussion, and we can get into a discussion in a second on Central Middle School, but it's not on the 15-year plan because, or it's not on the request in this version because it has the board passed an interim request, so the intent would be to fund it outside of the capital process. However, we can talk about if we want to do that or not, or keep it on for discussion purposes until it does get funded. But that's why you'll see that removed. That was 49.5 million. Old Greenwich is still in at the moment at the time of this printing. And if you take those 2 projects out, we're just around 30 million. So.
Karen.
Yeah, so the entry, the security project. Yeah. No, that's not the entryway. No, that is for the interim that the board and the town funded. Hey, Dan, you can come up if you want. We pushed it out.
I got
Yeah, so
Yeah, I was just
Can-
saying, Karen, I think we're kind
Christine-
of, yeah,
Christina, go ahead.
shouldn't we go through in a more order? If we're going to go through this on a kind of orderly basis, like jumping to like the 15th item, let's go through. Because I actually think we should talk about the Old Greenwich and Central issue first. No, I mean, I'll just give you my point of view. I think we've made interim funding requests for both. I think it would be wise of us when we're passing the capital budget to include both of them, maybe as a separate voting item saying in the event they are not funded on an interim basis, we want them in the fiscal year 25 capital budget. So kind of a conditional request. I'm sure the BET will be happy to take it out if they've already funded it. Are you agreeing with me, Mike?
Michael.
I agree because this was the news. I worry that if it's not included somewhere.
I don't want it to slip through the cracks, that
Exactly.
it doesn't get funded on an interim basis. We haven't asked for it on our next year's
We're
budget.
accused of a process.
I think
challenge.
it's safe to say everyone here will agree with that. Anyone?
And we can make the
Contrary?
motion on those two different than the rest of the capital budget when we do it.
Because after next month, we lose control of the capital budget.
just put it in.
Well, but those two, we could just include them, or we could include them as a separate motion.
I think no one's talking against it, so please include.
I'll just put them back in.
Thank
Or
you.
I'll just put that back in. I'll put them both in.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's this then, which I can pass out, was the Central Middle School project sheet. It's the same one that it's the same dollar amount, but it's for the 49.5 million. And we'll put the project sheet back in, and it's the estimate based on the request.
Thank you, Michael.
I'm wondering if we can talk, I mean, totally take questions and things, but I'm wondering if maybe like we've done in the past, some kind of, since we just got all these sheets yesterday, some kind of question document circulated the board, but over the next couple of weeks might be a helpful procedure here.
It's in 2 weeks.
I know.
So I think maybe what would be good is if Blaze just runs through kind of highlights of changes
Sure.
from the last version, because we did have a long discussion and last version, and I agree on
I think we
a
said-
Q&A document, but I think we're on the clock.
Yeah, no, I
so
think
to
the
speak.
executive summary of the changes, yeah, I agree. And the other thing is, the other question I have, while you're talking about that, I don't know if given the storms last week and all of the updates that we got around town, if we think that that surfaced anything that we need to be thinking about in the next 2 weeks, as far as capital, in all honesty.
We moved a couple of roof projects around. We'll get to that when we get to roofs. Yeah, I think so. Here's what I'm thinking based on what we're talking about right now. I'll quickly run through, kind of sheet by sheet, since it's in the same order as the 15-year plan for the request, right? And then, so we'll run through quickly on the sheets. And the budget committee, I believe, Cody, we're going to have a meeting as well within the next week to talk about some specific areas. I think so. I did talk to Cody earlier just to.
He's gonna be on and off. He's dozing off. So he said for me to wake him up, if it's
Okay, well, I did talk to Cody. He's gonna ask the budget committee to meet to go through some specific questions, talk through things like on Cardinal, you'll see on the stadium, we're double counting, like we kind of mentioned before. There's a couple other specific questions. And then I would say that you could submit questions maybe to me or to Dr. Jones. We'll do a Q&A. We'll review the Q&A with the budget committee and circulate that to the full board. And we can do a few Q&As given
We
the
did
time.
the running Q&A document last time. I thought that would be helpful just to like.
Sound good? Okay.
Excellent.
So ADA compliance, Dan has been working with, this is the one that we have, SPA Silver Petroselli, doing a full comprehensive review of all of our schools. We already have one done for Western Middle School. And we have in here that report to start working on Western Middle School. Bless you. It's a prioritized report, which we will share also, like as part of this, to Mike's point, we'll share with the board the full Western Middle School report. I think the good news, well, not good news, but the news for this board will be that we'll have some really rough numbers from SPA by the 19th when you're voting for each school. But it still won't really be ideal. I think we're going to have them like come in November and give a presentation of the overall audit. We still have a little ways to go. They've done 5 schools. Like per school, depending on the condition, we're seeing, I think, just really, really rough. There's like a few schools, like a few of the newer ones, like a Glenville or a Hamilton Avenue, that are roughly more in like the $500,000 to $750,000 range, and then probably a range of schools that are like around $1 million, and then 2 or 3 schools that are like over $3 million. This effort, I think as a board, we can kind of closely also coordinate, which we've done kind of every step of the way with the advisory committee for people with disabilities. And there is something that Dan and I are exploring right now, also with David Stein, and the state, is likely these projects will be of a scope that we can seek state reimbursement for code compliance. And that's something that we'll explore, and kind of as part of the budget conversation, we'll have some better information about. But we came up with some pretty, hopefully, creative strategies to get these projects eligible for like a state reimbursement potentially, which would be like a renovation reimbursement. So draft information within the next couple of weeks, but it's kind of just a placeholder at the moment. But that's what we're doing with ADA. Administration building, there's been no change since the last meeting. Stop me if you have questions. Cardinal Field, this is one that I think the budget committee should tackle in more detail. This has double counting in it, as what the town would refer to. It has phase 2, which we increased in value because we were still using to a fault the $4 million number, which was an older number. And Dan, interrupt me too if you need to. And then we also have all of the other related like maintenance items that need to happen there. And then we also mentioned that we received the like some safety concerns from a consultant through Parks and Recreation about the current the outside lane we talked about last time. That's what these numbers are here in fiscal year 25. It's basically just those first two items of 50,000 each are to address life safety potential hazards there. And then the track recoding, that's not an expansion or a resurfacing, that's a recoding of the existing track, which
Blaze,
was
I'm going to
reviewed for.
stop you there for a second. Dan, do we have knowledge, you have specific knowledge of this track issue? I know you're a track guy. Is this something that I did in the era when doing Cardinal Stadium initially, or is that the original fence place?
As far as what, the track coding?
No, the track, the eighth lane, the outside lane and the fencing.
Major discussions about it we had two different building committees at the time. And it was, I don't want to make light. Who wanted to grow the track. Right now it's a 6-lane track. They needed 8-lane in order for you to host FCAC championships. And that's what brought that up.
So did we, I guess the question is more specific. Did we move the fence, or is the fence in the same place it was prior to changing Cardinal Stadium?
The fence is basically in the same spot.
So we didn't do anything to cause this problem.
No,
I
we
didn't do
moved
anything
the
to cause this
bleachers
problem.
forward, but there was always a fence.
Good. I just wanted to make sure I didn't screw something up and.
Well, you may have, but
Of course,
that's
that's different story. Of course.
That's
Thank you.
split decision. So
Of course. Thank you. It brings my mind to ease. Thank you very much.
Ceilings and lighting, really not much changes. We just slightly adjusted a couple of numbers. Here we're hoping to, this is also one, I don't have it on the sheet, but we're hoping to get reimbursement for a few of these projects through the incentive program, like we mentioned last time, the Energize CT. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because some of these, things like the ceilings and lights and things like that. I know you were saying you were looking to get some possible reimbursement from the state, because I know there's some, but are there other grants that we could be looking into? Do we have somebody looking into grants for some of these changes? Because I know some of it's like environmental protection changes and stuff for lighting. No?
Yeah. So the lighting is also going to be like the Energize CT program. Representative Meskers actually set up a meeting with Connecticut Deep recently, and I attended that with a couple of reps from building committees. We're trying to work through how to access some of these other funds. There really wasn't a lot that in this federal funding that was geared towards schools. We kind of found out, but we're still kind of working through other grant opportunities we can get. We did just apply for a security grant, which we just got the award that we did not get it, but kind of every grant that we can apply for, we're trying to apply for. We met with the commissioner's office at Deep. Drainage, no change since the last meeting. This is programmed to go through system by system and start getting a look at what's under there. Emergency lighting, no change from the last meeting. It's that is more. Oh, I think we refined the number for Parkway. Yeah, good catch, Karen. We put in a number for Parkway that is more of an actual estimate for a total upgrade of the system at Parkway, including the parking lot lights. Yeah, you're welcome.
it's getting too late for this.
Okay, that's that. Equipment is equipment related to facilities, maintenance, and that's a purchase of a scissor lift, and then district equipment for like replacing the floor scrubbing machines and the spraying machines. Exterior concrete masonry. Not too much here. Went down a little bit. The Old Greenwich project will coordinate with the building committee. Talking to James about that, but that's work that would be done anyways. It'll be done coordinated with them. They're limited on certain parts of the building as to what they're doing. Flooring is flooring request. This program has kind of been merged and moved around a little bit. It used to be like painting and flooring, and then it was partially separated to finish as flooring. And we've kind of just isolated it to be just focusing on flooring replacements. And for this year, we're looking to do North Mianus and North Street. North Street's the one that has the crack in the floor, right? Yeah. North Street has a crack in the floor, large crack in the floor. Furnishing and program space equipment. This has been a few different approaches. It's a continuation, and Dr. Jones, you can correct me on this one. This is a continuation of a academic based program space equipment replacement program that was started just before COVID, 2018, 2019, 18, 19. And there hasn't been a tolerance for a full scale, maybe program of like $1 million. So the GHS went through and did a full, really detailed assessment of all of their classrooms and their classroom furniture. Dr. Jones got a quote based on those needs, and we then, to make it more tolerable, broke it up into a multi-year program around $300,000 per year instead of like a one-time larger number to make it maybe more tolerable overall. That's focusing on just classroom equipment at GHS in the first. The out years are just placeholder numbers based on elementary classroom replacements. GHS cellular improvement. This is a new, well, this is added back in. This was not in the last one. This one is to to put the cellular service into the building. It's the one Mike Ting had presented last year. This was presented as our solution. It was the one that was removed for the cell tower. We're still coordinating with the cell tower, but our kind of, I think, approach right now is the cell tower in and of itself, the testing didn't, they tested two different sides of the building. Each one had its own deficiency. It didn't reach, didn't fully penetrate into certain areas. I think the theory here would be that if there was a cell tower, the service providers would pay to cover a similar program. What we've done, I think we have some concerns potentially that would be for discussion, not maybe tonight, but a question to the board would be, we do have concerns, safety concerns about the lack of cell service there and the timing and reality of a cell tower being built on the GHS property. So we have kind of our own situation after we did go through this testing in partnership with the First Selectman's office. And I think we kind of ended up here. Simultaneously, this is something that maybe we could keep in our request as a solution to the problem. And I did ask that the First Selectman's office, based on the test results, write a letter to this board, maybe outlining the plan or the thought process on the cell tower. So hoping that we could get that before the vote that comes up, so we have some context of what they're thinking with the cell tower. I did see a question.
Oh, so you said the results weren't great. Like, can we have 2 devices that would solve the problem? I mean, do we have a viable solution?
The solution, so this solution here that Mike Ting had put forward, and it's the same one actually that the cell providers would have to do. It's putting like a device on the top that catches the cell service and then repeaters throughout the building and pipes it throughout. And the thought was, could we build a cell tower on the property that would penetrate far enough into the building to provide the coverage? And Mike Ting, the First Selectman schedule, they have a consultant for this. They're the same ones that have done other cell towers and are doing the proposal for the Nathaniel Witherall. they brought a crane right before school. They put the two in the air. It still showed deficiencies in and of the cell tower by itself. But they could do the same thing basically, which is pipe the service throughout. Ours would be doing it, but we would be paying for it. That's the difference.
But this is
And
the
this would be
same,
getting done.
and this is the one we proposed last year and got cut.
This
Or
is yeah.
is this the exact same proposal over a 2-year period?
This is the same thing, and it's phased to
Okay.
try to soften the cost.
Yeah, no, I think, that's just to
Same
understand.
exact thing as last year.
Got it.
The exact same. Actually, Mike is getting, we just went through this and Mike is getting updated numbers because this is literally the exact same sheet as last year. Right? Yep. We'll share the results. We didn't share any of the tests, right? But we'll share the results within the next day or two with the full board. We have like 4 or 5 reports to share. The ones I keep mentioning. I just wanted to make sure I'm getting you the right versions of them. Hamilton Avenue HVAC replacement. We put in a little bit more realistic of a number, I think, instead of we had it at 2.2 we asked for last year, got cut. Then we had put in our placeholder at 1.5 million. Now we're kind of closer to the 2.2 with also A&E money. This one I think will be one that we're going to end up asking to go for an interim so that we can have the problem addressed before school starts rather than wait till the summertime. If we get an interim funding, we can engage the consultants to start designing the system and we can secure the contract so it could be done next summer, right? Or else we would lose a whole nother year. We're also renting the unit at the $20,000 a month. Right now, we're waiting on the geothermal expert to give us the order of magnitude. So we have the cost of that proposal. And Lero said by the end of the month, we should have the traditional system replacement. It's the big question for Lero, which is taking them longer than probably you and I thought, is the distribution. The question of can we use the same distribution equipment throughout the building? And that would be a drastically different cost. If we can repurpose it, it'll be significantly cheaper. Well, yeah, in theory. Hamilton Avenue parking deck. I think we shared the report at the last meeting. This was option A, plus the A&E money. HVAC, we talked about how we separated out the GHS program specifically. This is replacing distribution equipment house by house. The HVAC program for the rest of the district. This request is specifically focused on 2 things. The fiscal year 25 is Western Middle School. This is to put in a full HVAC system to the building, which it currently does not have. Dan did get a order of magnitude to get this cost estimate. The 300,000 is to design the system in 25 for a execution in 26. In district, you'll also see another 100,000 added to like our $25,000 line. We added in every 5 years $100,000. The state passed a HVAC testing program that is new. It will be required as of January 2025. And we're anticipating it'll be about $100,000 every 5 years. Every school district will have to submit this new report. They did push it back. It was passed actually to be done in January 24, but most of the school districts really pushed back aggressively because of the time frame and the cost. And so this program is now pushed back to 25, but it's as of now slated for 25. And this is we're still lacking some clarity on specifically what the test is and requirements are going to be. We just know it's going to be required in January 1st of 25.
Right. The regulators have not provided a full-blown set of parameters on what needs to be tested. And the people that they've identified as organizations who can do the testing included, obviously engineers, hygienists, and companies that do air balancing. Well, unit costs or labor rates for each of those different types of firms are significantly different. if we could get a balancing company to come in and do it for $100 an hour versus an engineer at $300 an hour, that's what we need to do, but we really need to check with the regulators as far as the parameters.
Julian Curtis renovation, no change from the last meeting. This is the remainder of the project. We're proposing to move it to 25. Joe, I know that I talked to Bill. He was gonna talk to you at the meeting tomorrow about if there's any other needs for A&E funding. In addition, that should be added to this if you're short for this, like for the elevator or the other pieces. So the building committee will let us know if there's another request that if they need some more A&E funding. Life safety systems. This is, we have one wing at the high school for 25. That's all we're focusing on. It's to augment the existing system there. You'll see on 25, we're really trying not to do too much work because in 24, this is one of the ones we're going to engage a professional firm this year to do kind of an overall assessment. We're having a lot of issues with life safety systems probably overall, and we need like an outside expert to come in, and most of the systems are just pieced together through years of different either individual small funding items or like, let's address this security piece. Let's address this fire piece. So we have 5 different fire alarm systems. We have multiple different public address systems. We have different security systems through Tom Bobkowski. And a lot of them are just this really complex patchwork of pieces. We know we have concerns from our colleagues at the police department. We have our own internal concerns, and so we're gonna bring in a professional to maybe design a kind of a whole new approach for us to how we can integrate all these systems. And similar to HVAC, or what Dan's been doing with building controls, do the same thing with like the fire panels, for example. Just get one vendor who's servicing the district rather than we have 5 different service contracts right now for each building. Old Greenwich is Old Greenwich, and we said we'll leave items in until they're funded or otherwise. So we'll also add Central Middle School back in. Other is it's really lighting, paving, and painting. And this is this year for 25. It's 2 projects at ISD. It's the parking lot lighting, which they're lacking. And then the addition is the a fence at the field. We've had vehicles driving on the field repeatedly and causing damage at ISD. And we do have camera footage that has been shared. Parks and Rec has repaired the field now, I think 3 times. And we're gonna put in a maybe like a fence. Yeah, right. Doing donuts on the field. It's a Jeep. They have we have it on video. Have the person. We do have the person on video, but we don't know who it is.
Yeah.
Police. It's with the
Couldn't get the plate.
yeah.
They have
No
a
plate.
picture of the person, and I was thinking it was her.
Maybe a closer look. It was a minivan. If anyone knows any information, if people are still awake, they can let the GPD know. Other minor renovations. This is a program that's been through various versions of it. It's basically a capital program that's in here to fund projects that are not currently identified that come up like capital is far enough out where we don't necessarily know that some of the curriculum requirements or what's happening at a specific building. This funding is typically used to like if there's a maker space that we find out at a school that we need to move, or the principal has something at their direction. Capital is so early that you don't necessarily know next like for 25, 26, what there's going to be a specific need. So that's what this program
So
is.
you're not attributing that 300,000 to anything in particular?
No.
Nothing.
So is there any chance the BET cuts that out?
Playgrounds, I think we have the order right, but we're getting better numbers from Darren. He was out today. Yeah, this is on me. I just asked Parks and Rec yesterday for better numbers. So that one I'll present to the building committee, but or not building committee, to the budget committee. Plumbing and electrical is getting to be, it's a number of projects. Fairly basic. We don't need to go through in detail at the moment. Renovate gymnasiums. So we talked about, we consolidated elements that have been like 4 gyms, but like not in one spot. And so we kind of put it into this one program here so that we can do a gym at a time, or focus on specific elements. This year's request, the priorities we received from when we met with Pete G, would be the curtain. You can see the pictures Dan took. It's ripped in multiple spots at the high school, and then 2 flooring replacements that are ready for flooring replacement. Riverside renovation, following our last meeting, we moved it up to be 1, 2, 3. We increased the numbers using a similar inflation rate. And this is more what it comes out at. So instead of being like a $15 million random number with a random A&E number, we took some of the numbers from what we kind of saw with Old Greenwich. And we moved it up to 1, 2, 3. Roofs are, this is where, like Karen, you should see some shifts. We swapped projects actually at North Mianus. We also moved up in 26 some funding for Julian Curtis. North Mianus is probably the big priority here. At Western Middle School, we were already planning on doing, that's over the tech and music wing. Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything that we specifically.
No, other than at the Western Middle School, it's not a real significant big area, but there is steel damage.
Structural.
The steel decking that holds the roof in place has failed over the years, and we didn't see it till we renovated the wood shop this past summer. So we added that back into the next year's budget request.
At secure entrance redesign. So after the last meeting, we are taking a little bit of a different approach. This is a new project. It was not on the 15-year plan last year. It is in relation to the interim that we did for the secure entryways. We have 2 schools that need to basically be redesigned because of where a stairwell is located and the number of doors that would be involved. This is ISD and Eastern Middle School. The previous numbers in there that we had put the last meeting were like 300,000 each. That's just not even like a reasonable number. This is a little more reasonable. Eastern Middle School is a much more significant project than ISD. It involves the stairwell. ISD should be a little bit more straightforward. But what we're proposing here is actually just pushing those out and funding some A&E, so we actually come up with a potential what this actually might look like. And depending on what that comes back, is this worth the investment for the security level, or would a different approach make sense? Something like that. Like at Eastern Middle School, we're talking about, there's this whole stairwell, potentially relocating. This could be something that maybe is extremely expensive, and a different approach makes sense. So we pushed out the funding and just do some A&E at the moment. Otherwise, that interim project is just about done. There's only 1 school left that needs a wall built to just secure something up. But other than that, all the school security entrances are completed. Stage renovation, these are just placeholder numbers. Right now, we're using the existing funding. We kind of scrapped what the random things were, scrapped those, and Dan is engaging, or we're trying to engage, if we can find one, a professional firm to come in and do an assessment of all of our stage-based infrastructure. We really don't have a good understanding of that, and there is some extensive infrastructure on these stages. with lights and curtain rods. And we're going to go through systematically this year and come up with a multi-year program. We know that some of the stages have height concerns, that they wouldn't be built the way they're built now. And so we're just going to go through before we do anything else and have someone put together a assessment of all of the infrastructure there. These are literally just, this time we made it pretty clear. These are just program placeholders.
No, I think that's a really good practice going forward, Blaze. When you are doing a placeholder, to say it's a placeholder. Love it.
Yeah, we tried to do that a little bit more on here, where if it's a program placeholder, to just call that specifically on each sheet. Stairs, ramps, and walls. This year is primarily this is our exterior program. This is this year you'll see, actually, I think Dan took pictures right on here. This is the wall at Julian Curtis. It's leaning, it's cracked along the kindergarten patio. It needs to be replaced. Mike's favorite word is vertical transportation, also known as elevators, but also lifts and other items. This is another area where we put placeholder on the front, Christina, but we didn't put it in the back, which we should also put it on the back. We are proposing to do something similar, which is have a company come in and do an assessment of all of our elevator infrastructure. I think I misspoke last time and said we had fewer elevators than we actually do. We have 10 elevators at the high school, and we have 8 in the rest of the district. That's what we put on here.
There's 4, 5, 6, 7. I think there's 10. Yeah. Elevators.
Yeah, you got this from the
List.
custodian. Yeah. And we have 8 throughout the district. So we are going to bring in a consultant to go through some of that infrastructure and do the same thing. Put together a program for taking care of it. Windows and doors, we're starting to get to a fairly good place this year. We're focusing on some smaller replacements. You'll see that we shifted we went back for the big one here for the next few years, and actually in 29 we're going to put another 3 million because it's even more than that. We're going to put another 3 million. So Greenwich High School, the windows, right, are due for replacement. We talked about, we went back and looked at the report from Hygienics, and what we need to do kind of next, which we're proposing $100,000 to do, is put a quote from the report, and I think we have this on our list of things to share, but is to put a plan / specification must be prepared for the proper remediation of all identified materials based on the selected approach. The plan may need to be reviewed by the US EPA and Connecticut DEEP. That was given to us in the report. And so before we go down too far, the next step for us would be to do that plan and have someone take a more in-depth look at the PCBs in the windows.
Is that why the number went down so drastically from?
Yes.
And then added to the following? out
Yeah,
year?
so it's shifting the specific the windows out, because this is also just a placeholder, but it's going house by house, or floor by floor, wing by wing. And then, but now it's shifting it out so we could get someone in here to take a better look at it, and also see if we need to coordinate with the EPA and DEEP. And then the last one is Western Middle School soil remediation. This is the contingency. I did seek some guidance from both a rep from BET and also from Roland separately from Town Finance. And because I think at the last meeting we talked, like, should we do an interim versus should we do this as part of the request? As of now, just keeping it as part of the 25 capital request. And then if there's a need to access contingency any earlier than that, then we could do it as an interim, was kind of the guidance. We don't need the cash right now at the moment. We can execute all the contracts. We did make really good progress on the contract with Charter. It's over with the law department. And also with the other key stakeholders. So it's basically out of the 20 million we have, it'll basically be like 98% appropriated with the contract with Charter, but unless something came up as an emergency, this is fine.
So we came to an agreement with the bakery. Are we near that?
What bakery? Yeah. We're very close. We're very close. Yeah, CMS is going to go back in for the next version. We already have the sheet, and it's going to be if it's in the capital plan, it's the number plus the inflation. Yes. Which we are just using the Turner inflation.
Can you just send that SIP sheet, the CIP sheet to us to add in?
Yeah, I'll send it, and I'll also we'll post it online. Yeah. So. No, because this isn't right.
Bag of money.
Very good. Thank you, Blaze. That was fantastic.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks to the team here. They're extremely just
Kim,
awesome.
Dan, Blaze, thank you. I know a lot of work have gone into this. Thank you very much. Only to be turned down. So, Michael, you seem like you want to say something. Correct. Oh, we have E.
And then Jonathan will clean up for
We
us.
have
And I'll talk to Cody, who's gonna have the budget committee meet.
one more thing. Dr. Jones is going to give us a strategic plan update. Thank you. See you guys.
Okay, I'll start over. So everything, I think pretty much what they said tonight, goes to this. And there is a 2-3 minute short video that's online, and it just talks about how really it's got like a pyramid, the district strategic plan, and then it's, really followed by our school improvement plans, all of our individual goals, including mine. So, yeah, so we're very excited about it.
I'm just gonna follow up to Karen. I know we can all click through to the various schools. If there's any way to just get a push document sent to us, which has them, like at least the cover page for each schools, like you said, like we can go look at each school's individual.
If Mike, I had sent a request to Mike. I don't know if he's listening or not, just to maybe take all of the and just make a PDF for us to send, so we don't have to go to 15 different school sites and multiple links in those sites.
I would be
Just
happy
to
to do
combine
that
them.
once they're all posted tomorrow.
Dankeschön.
Then are the building leaders presenting to each of their communities?
They do every year. Yes, absolutely.
Laura, do you have a motion for us?
I feel like I've won an award. Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second? Oh, we have a second. Karen, all in favor, raise your hand. Oh, Cody says he's in favor too. So that's 8-0. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. You want to,